how's it going? Let's discuss the socio-political climate surrounding the release of a 20-year-old video game. But first, let me tell you a quick story. I'm 10 or 11 years old and I'm sitting in my grandma's kitchen when I catch sight of a few gaming and electronics magazines that belong to my uncle on the corner of the kitchen table. Things like Game Informer, EGM, GamePro, all the goodies. And flipping through the pages, eyeing them passively, not really knowing most of the titles except for the big ones like Call of Duty, the kind of stuff with the really big advertising budgets that you absorb through TV commercials. But suddenly, I see an ad for a game that I've never seen before. On one side is Sonic and Eggman. I know those guys. Everyone knows those guys. Next to them is some low poly white guy and some weird alien thing. But then my eyes track to the other page, and I see this. Now this is the first time in my life that I ever saw Shadow the Hedgehog. At this point, the only Sonic game that I'd ever played was Sonic Advance 3, the game that my uncle, the same uncle who owned the gaming magazine that I was going through, had bought me for my 10th birthday, just about a year before all this. Now, my parents couldn't really afford video games, and it's not like they let me have just free access to the internet at the time, so I had no idea who Shadow even was. This was my first exposure. I'd been living in ignorance this whole time. So I didn't know him, but that didn't really matter. He had this cool tagline, he had a gun, he looked like Sonic, except way cooler, and look at all that fire, what's his deal? I remember staring at him and thinking to myself that I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out why he looked so angry. What I didn't know at the time is that at this point in Shadow's story, he has amnesia. He also doesn't know why he's angry. He's just walking around mad, not knowing why. And as someone who was about to start puberty at the time and was also about to be walking around mad, not knowing why, I could relate. I spend the next month of my life learning everything I can about this game. Finding clips of the opening cinematic, seeing him shoot aliens and kick bad guys and walk out of a wall of flames and ride a motorcycle into an explosion? Like, what the fuck? Are you looking at this? I was a really sheltered kid. I didn't know art could be like this. I didn't know that you could do this with media. To my 11-year-old brain, this was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Hell, to my 30-year-old brain right now, this is so fucking raw that it loops around to stupid and then it loops back around to raw as hell again. And if you're thinking that this advertisement campaign is nothing more than a shallow corporate ploy to appeal to 10-year-olds with anger issues, let me tell you, you're right. And it worked! This is what effective corporate strategy looks like, people. Are you even doing marketing right if you don't make an 11-year-old experience their first true love? Sega does what Nintendo don't, and Nintendo didn't have Mario shooting cops in the streets of Westopolis. The cowards. I don't know what kind of crack Sega put into this Hedgehog's marketing campaign, but whatever it was laced with, it rearranged the molecules in my DNA like I was Danny Phantom. Someone tell RFK, vaccines don't cause autism. The advertisement for Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 in the January 2006 issue of GamePro magazine causes autism. I don't know, man, I can't be the only one. There's gotta be some kind of class action lawsuit for this shit, seriously. Now, you might be thinking that this whole thing, this anthropomorphic hedgehog with a gun, is a little bit silly, and I guess technically I agree. But if you want a YouTube personality to talk to you about how it being silly is a bad thing, you might be in the wrong video, buddy. And don't worry, you have options. You can't kick a rock in the Shadow 2005 search results without hitting some YouTuber who's making fun of this video game. But that's not what this video is going to be. God help me, I love Shadow the Hedgehog 2005. I don't know if it's a good game. God knows it wasn't popular when it came out. I mean, read some of these reviews from Game Informer. It will tear out your childhood and pee on the pieces? It smells like dirty diaper. Did Shadow the Hedgehog shoot your dog? What the fuck? So yeah, I don't know if the game is great, but I love its gumption. You know, there's no going back. The hedgehog has the gun at this point. Either get with it or get out of his way. If the whimsy of an armed and dangerous hedgehog isn't something that you personally can appreciate, I am sorry for whatever the world has done to take that joy away from you. Because there is something so fun about giving this little guy a pump-action assault rifle? So yeah, this won't be a 2-hour video making fun of this game because frankly, I am beyond making fun of the things that I love. I am too old for shame. I don't remember much else of 2006 and 2007 because I hyperfixated so hard that I think I blacked out for 2 years. I'm fairly certain I spent every minute in the throes of a Sonic the Hedgehog and Shadow the Hedgehog obsession, scouring the internet for every bit of Sonic lore and popular media that I could access for free. I couldn't play the Dreamcast games because my parents weren't going to buy me a Dreamcast and I wasn't white. I didn't have an allowance, so I couldn't buy it myself. But I could play the fuck out of Sonic Ultimate Flash in the library. I couldn't play Sonic Adventure, but I could read Tikal's wiki pages. And this is fresh out of YouTube being created, so cutscene compilation movies weren't really a thing back then, but I could track down individual cutscenes and watch them at 140p with resolution so bad that it looked like my mom got YouTube to censor them in her place. This is what I would do every minute I could. Like, I wasn't allowed unsupervised on my home computer, so I would pretend to be sick in class. So the teacher would send me to the nurse, and then I would go to the library and I would watch Super Mario Bros. Z. I had straight A's, so they let me get away with it. I was a menace to society. I wasn't throwing up. I was printing out the character bios from the Sonic Channel website and putting them in my designated Sonic the Hedgehog binder. You hear that, Miss Vespin? I lied to you. Constantly. Poor woman probably thought I had a stomach condition, but who could blame me? This hedgehog had me in a chokehold. I feared for my life, Your Honor. He had a gun. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Some of you still haven't met our protagonist, our black-hearted evil and or our brave-hearted hero. So, with that being said, let's do it. Let me tell you the story of Shadow the Hedgehog. Sorry if you've heard this one before. I'll try to keep the pre-2005 events of Shadow the Hedgehog's life brief. I'll also be keeping it more or less in chronological order, since in actuality, his life story is kind of split between a few games. Sonic fans watching this, I know you all know Shadow's backstory, but I'm not a Sonic tuber. 90% of my videos are about Gravity Falls, meaning 90% of my audience doesn't know this man. I've been slowly introducing new hyperfixations to the ecosystem. You gotta do it slowly. It's like introducing a fish to a new water tank. A little bit at a time. You don't want to shock the system. But hey, a refresher course couldn't hurt. There is a lot of information hanging around about Shadow's backstory. You know, for the most mysterious character in the franchise, we sure do know a lot about him. I would argue more than we know about Sonic's backstory. But if you want to skip the bulk of the backstory, like the Sonic Adventure 2 stuff, there's a timestamp on screen. Shadow's story really begins 50 years before present day with Gerald Robotnik, a brilliant scientist who wants to go to create a space colony research lab to unlock the mysteries of utopian life. And the government notices and they're like, are you making weapons or something? And Gerald's like, no, are you kidding me? I want to make the world a better, safer place. I wouldn't dream of making weapons. And the government's like, what a shame, because we were going to pay for it completely if it was weapons. And Gerald just starts sweating profusely because he knows that eventually he is going to need to give them weapons if he wants funding. It's not something that he wants to do, but he's not in a great position to say no, especially when he finds out that his granddaughter Maria is sick with an autoimmune disorder, and he needs his research to be funded to find the cure. Maria is a delight, probably the kindest, most selfless person to ever be born. I wouldn't get too attached if I were you. Gerald's goal is now to cure her disease, and it intersects with the demands of the President of the United Federation and with the military organization GUN, the Guardian Unit of Nations, also known as GUN. On top of the existing weapons research that GUN has started demanding and getting from Gerald, GUN wants to generate an undying soldier, and the President wants something to unlock the secrets of immortality. Gerald has his reservations, but such a creature could also lead to the cure for Maria's disease. And that seals it. He sets out to create the ultimate life form, promising his research to GUN in exchange for their continued funding. And if they want to take the ultimate life form afterwards, well, he'll cross that bridge when he gets to it. But what matters is that Maria will be alive in the end. His first attempt uses a salamander as a base, which makes some sense. Salamanders have regenerative qualities, and sure, that sounds like how science works. And the first try doesn't go super well. It's a rough draft. Sometimes you try to cure AIDS and you end up with a giant mutant salamander that won't stop screaming. So they stuff it in the basement and they try again. Gerald is getting really frustrated, and of course GUN is ramping up their demands, but by some miracle, or some curse, a solution appears in front of him. A black comet hosting a hive mind alien race called the Black Arms swings by around Earth once every 50 years. Black Doom is the leader of the aliens, and he also has the ability to harness chaos control, power over time itself, something that Gerald believes can be useful in helping cure Maria. And yeah, he'll make a deal with the devil to save his granddaughter, Black Doom gives Gerald an alien sample so he can use its DNA to make Project Shadow. And in turn, Black Doom wants a super soldier to destroy the world. Basically, the devil wants his Antichrist. And Gerald makes the deal, knowing that Black Doom's intent is to destroy the Earth when the comet swings around this neck of the woods again. And if Black Doom comes to collect that super soldier in 50 years, well, 50 years is a long time. Gerald has a plan. He'll cross that bridge when he gets to it, but when he gets to it, Maria will be alive. Project Shadow, the ultimate life form, wakes up from his tube, manages to not always be in pain and screaming like the prototype, and he instantly becomes best friends with Maria. They spend their days looking out the window at Earth, making dreams for what their life will be when she's finally cured. Just tons of planning and hoping and dreaming for a wonderful future, a lot of eggs being put in one very tentative and uncured basket. But then, after a couple of incidents garner the attention of the government, military, perhaps growing tired of not being in complete control of the weapon on the Ark that is being developed for them, send armed gunmen to capture Gerald, destroy all evidence of Project Shadow existing, and of course, to kill everyone on board. Maria is shot down by the military. Her final act is a sacrifice for Shadow. She pushes him into the escape pod, she tells him her dying wish, and she sends him to Earth. Worst of it is, Gunn catches him anyways. He gets captured and he puts in stasis in a prison tube where he's left to marinate in his trauma for 50 years, asleep to the world. Gerald has very little time left before he is executed by the military. He is overcome with grief and the weight of his mistakes. He has made too many deals, has spread himself too thin, and between his promises to Gunn and to the Black Arms, he lost Maria, the only thing that mattered to him. So, with nothing to live for, he decides to doom us all. He reprograms Shadow's memories so that Shadow cannot remember Maria's last wish, and he ensures that when Shadow awakens, Shadow will want nothing more than to get vengeance in Maria's name. Gerald at this point is like, you want to use the ultimate life form as a weapon? You want to kill the people that I love to do that? Fine. Fuck around and find out. Sonic Adventure 2 officially begins with Dr. Eggman fucking around and finding out. He had read about Project Shadow, the ultimate life form, in Gerald Robotnik's diary. And like just about everyone in the United Federation 50 years ago, he goes, oh shit, it's a super weapon. Neat. And he proceeds to wake Shadow up from the tube. God, I just gotta say, I love how they introduce Shadow in this first cutscene. He like rises up out of the chamber like a vampire. He's like, I'll grant you one wish, master. Like a fucking genie. I want to be clear, he cannot grant wishes. He's just making this up on the spot to trick Eggman. This is all improv. God, he was so cunty back then. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's cunty now, but I don't know, I kind of missed the drama, I missed the flair. I feel like this version of Shadow was having a lot more fun with it. He's a bit of a theater kid. He would shoot me for saying that, but sorry Shadow, I know what you are. Shadow, the ultimate life form, immediately begins breaking into government bases and stealing Chaos Emeralds from banks. And the reason he doesn't get caught is because the cops blame Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, you remember how this is actually a game series about local fast blue guy and chili dog enthusiast Sonic the Hedgehog? Sonic starts the game running away from the cops in Central City because the military has confused him for Shadow. They have Sonic locked up in a helicopter and he needs to escape. Why do they mistake Sonic for Shadow? Well, because they look exactly alike. Yes, I do know that the story was written back when they had another design planned for Shadow that looked much closer to Sonic's design, though a little bit uglier if you ask me. But that isn't the design that they ended up going with, so we're left with the very unintentional side effect of Gunn being like hedgehog racist and not being able to tell them apart, which honestly, I like more. I think that's funny. I'm a fan. So while Sonic is evading racial profiling from local law enforcement,
sheesh, there always seems to be a lot of police around when you don't need them.
Shadow goes to space to carry out his revenge. In Sonic Adventure 2, the player slowly gets the whole picture. The evils of Gunn, the way that they killed Gerald, the way Shadow's memories have been altered so that he could use the Eclipse cannon, a giant space laser on the Ark that was put there by Gerald at the request of Gunn, and how Shadow's been convinced this entire time that what Maria would have wanted is revenge against humanity. But then, his memory gets jogged, and he learns that Maria's actual last words were this:
For all people who live on that planet, did their to be happy. Let them live without dreams.
Oops. And he's like, "Aw, shit, my bad." And he goes and helps our heroes, and he helps them kill the giant salamander, who, by the way, never left the Ark. He was still up there. He was screaming the whole time. And the salamander also seems to have been programmed by Gerald Robotnik to destroy the Earth in the event that Shadow couldn't do it. My guy, Gerald, had contingency plans for his contingency plans. He really wanted us dead in the end there. And in the end, Shadow the Hedgehog saves the Earth, valiantly giving his life away in the process. R.I.P. Shadow the Hedgehog. You would have loved the Barbie movie. Alexa, this is so sad. Can you play What Was I Made For? Now, I know Shadow spent 90% of this game wanting to kill every man, woman, and child on Earth, but there isn't really a valid interpretation of SA2 where he's thought of as evil. Gunn is widely considered to be the real villains. They're the ones who kidnapped Shadow the Hedgehog and put him in the prison tube. They're the ones who shot the little sick white girl. They took Sonic the Hedgehog and they put him in Sonic World Alcatraz. And of course, they caused an old man who initially wanted nothing more than to help humanity to have a nearly world-ending breakdown before executing him via firing squad. And at the end of it all, Shadow is dead, never to be seen again. Until the next game, when Shadow is very much alive, and yet again in a tube. How does this keep happening to him? Shadow's life is really a series of tubes. In Sonic Heroes, Shadow wakes up and he doesn't have any memory of his backstory. The SD card has fallen out. He does make some friends though. Good for him. They're just as cunty as he is. I fucking love Team Dark, oh my god. They throw in some ambiguity in Sonic Heroes. Is this the real Shadow? Is he an Eggman robot? Is he a clone? Is the real Shadow actually dead? He doesn't know. He doesn't remember any of it. The Ark, the Lizard, Gerald, it's all gone. And now we are here. We have made it to Shadow05, the actual game that this YouTube video is about. So that being said, this is the story of Shadow the Hedgehog. So, by the time we start with Shadow05, we know more about Shadow the Hedgehog than he does. He literally begins the game not knowing where the name Shadow the Hedgehog comes from, and the only image that he still retains from before waking up in Sonic Heroes is that of Maria being shot. When the heavens open up on him and aliens descend on the city of Westopolis, Black Doom shows up. Shadow doesn't know it, but this guy is here to collect on a 50-year deal.
Find the 7 Chaos Emeralds and bring them to me as promised.
Huh? Who are you and how do you know I'm Shadow? And what are you talking about?
He orders Shadow to help him find the Chaos Emeralds, adding that if Shadow does this, Black Doom will provide him with the answers he seeks. So something people outside of this fandom might not know is that this game has a morality system, with over 300 different routes, all ramping up towards 10 different endings. All depending, of course, on what the player decides Shadow will do. Between Gunn, Eggman, Sonic and Company, Black Doom, various characters show up and they give Shadow opposing missions in each level. Like, hey, kill 20 aliens. Or hey, how about you kick 35 puppies? Will you help this old lady cross the street? Or will you burn down the orphanage? Who knows? You're the master of your own destiny. And Shadow can decide which missions to complete as he makes his way to the end of the game. I should note that aside from an additional story, the last story, the true ending, none of these 10 endings are canon. So we don't know how many of the scenes that take place in the middle of this game are canon, because the middle scenes are contingent on, I don't know, how many cops you shoot in the face, or how many soup kitchens you volunteer at. And that might change from playthrough to playthrough. Like, when you have hundreds of paths, how do you know which actions Shadow the Hedgehog would have actually taken? There are a couple of routes that the fandom consider to be more or less true routes, like they seem to be the actions that Shadow would have taken in the game. There's a couple of videos on this subject, I'm going to put one of them in the description that I found really interesting. And there are events that happen across every route, which we can assume to be more or less canon, but aside from that, the only elements that we know for a fact are canon are the very beginning and the very end of the game, at least if I'm understanding Shadow05 correctly. Still, for the purpose of this video, we will be treating these routes of at least indicative of character motivations. We don't know what Shadow will do because that's up to us, the player, but with these routes, we have a solid idea of how different groups would respond to Shadow if he took one action over another. For the purpose of this video, we'll be mostly focusing on the pure dark evil route and the pure good hero route. The two ends of the spectrum. The two genders. Though I'll be filling in some details that we learn in the middle routes and the neutral routes, as well as any factoids I find interesting. It's my video. So let's start at the bottom. In hell, with the dark route. You begin the dark route in the streets of Westopolis, with Black Doom ordering you to shoot as many members of the military as you can in the face. And when you do, Sonic the Hedgehog is there, scolding you. God, what a nerd! So basically, if you start doing evil things while a hero mission is selected, or vice versa, or even if you step too closely to a hero or a dark character while you're doing the opposite of what they want, that character will react to you not doing their mission and will tell you to stop. And Sonic is no exception. He's like, hey Shadow, don't shoot the cops, chili dogs, or whatever it is he says. I don't have a script in front of me. But the gist is, yo, Shadow, the cops are on our side.
To all who oppose me.
Hey, he's on our side.
Don't hurt them. Hurting the police is my least favorite thing to do.
He's taking out everyone aboard.
But in this route, Shadow ignores Sonic and he keeps shooting. We learn in a scene with the gun commander, Commander Abraham Tower, that the Black Arms have attacked 6 major cities across the world, and that Westopolis, the city that Shadow was just in, has suffered the biggest casualties because of its, quote, weakened defense system. That's kind of interesting, and we'll put a pin in that. When the commander hears that a black hedgehog matching Shadow's description has been spotted at the scene, he immediately gives the order for the soldiers to kill him on sight.
I gave you an order, soldier. He's evil and he's the enemy.
And sure enough, the next time Shadow interacts with some soldiers, they tell him that he is wanted in connection with terrorist attacks. Terrorist attacks. I mean, I guess technically it can be described as terrorism, but I think people would be quicker to describe it as an alien invasion. I think politically speaking, it has more in common with one nation attacking another nation. But you know what? We're splitting hairs. Let's just put a pin in that and move on. Black Doom orders Shadow to access the mainframe of the United Federation, an attack described in the next cutscene as an attack specifically on the CIA. Though it's a different acronym than the actual CIA, like instead of the Central Intelligence Agency, it's the Central Information Agency. Yeah, it's not name brand, but we got it on sale. Which explains why it was so easy for Shadow to break into it. This scene is our first real look at the President of the United Federation, a man who I'm going to call President, I don't know, George W. Bush. On the phone, President Bush says this.
Tell the commanding generals that the United Federation will never surrender to terrorists.
That feels... Wait, holy shit! Is that Sonic the Hedgehog on his desk? The president just has a photo of Sonic the Hedgehog and Shadow the Hedgehog on his desk. It's like they're his gay dads, and he keeps looking at his desk to keep himself grounded and to stop himself from forgetting his homegrown roots. He's wistfully staring at it like, oh gee, Sonic the Hedgehog and Shadow the Hedgehog from the popular video game franchise Sonic the Hedgehog. We're really in it now. What are we gonna do? I can't even talk shit. I'm gonna be honest, I have this photo. I also keep it on my desk. It brings me peace in these trying times. Is anyone else tired of these trying times? Of these unprecedented times? Is anyone else fucking ready for the times to be precedented again? You're wondering why I'm diving back into a 20-year-old hyperfixation now? I don't know, man, read the news. It's really rough right now, guys. I'm kind of going through it. Shadow the Hedgehog is carrying me through all this. Like, right now I am looking behind me, and there is one set of footprints in the sand, and they belong to Shadow the Hedgehog. Anyways, next to Black Arms invade Central City. Yes, that Central City. Man, good times. Anyways, they're gonna bomb the shit out of them. It looks like the people here need to escape from the city. So Black Doom has gathered here with like 6 aliens and also Shadow. Look at them posing like this is a boy band album cover. And Black Doom is like, let me tell you a secret, man. The humans? You've always hated them. You feel nothing but contempt for them. Trust me, they're the worst. You don't like them. I know these things. And Shadow's like, you know, I don't remember much, but that actually feels right. That feels correct somehow. I can't put my finger on why, but like, ooh, yeah, no, that doesn't sound wrong. And when they're done bombing the city, Black Doom actually sends Shadow up to space to where the Eclipse cannon is. And Shadow, after saying this,
say your prayers, you disgusting humans,
aims the Eclipse cannon at Earth. and specifically fires it at the United States. And you might be thinking, Hannah, don't you mean the United Federation, the Sonic World's knockoff version of the United States? No, I mean the United States. I can see Michigan. I can see the Great Lakes. I see Baja California here in Mexico. You can't tell me this isn't the US. I am looking at New Jersey. Which is insane because they have another map in Gun's headquarters of what Sonic's world looks like. And it isn't this. There is not a continent here that looks like the continental United States. If I were to analyze this choice, to put on my college-honed media analysis goggles, I might say that the animators wanted the player to associate this attack, an attack on the United Federation, with the feelings we would feel if there were a similar attack on the United States. To really drive home the emotional beat of this moment, these buildings crumbling in a cloud of dust and devastation, like, holy shit, they destroyed Nebraska/Iowa/Missouri, you bastards! But come on, I'm overthinking it. Surely, the animators didn't want you to associate this with an attack on US soil. Anyways, in the same cutscene, they blow up the White House.
Mr. President!
But don't worry guys, President George Bush is okay. Say what you will about the guy, but he was pretty good at avoiding direct attacks in the mid-2000s. It also turns out that everyone in Nebraska/Iowa/Missouri is safe, actually, at least according to the cowards on this game's writing team. Gun evacuated them to a safe zone. What the fuck are you talking about? This isn't a city, this is a tri-state area, just like Phineas and Ferb always talked about. You can't just evacuate this entire region, surely. They are full of shit, Mr. President. That man is lying to you, but whatever, sure. They evacuated the entire zone and everybody clapped. After this, it's a step too far. Sonic's no longer trying to convince you, he is teaming up with the gun commander to fight you. The gun commander calls Shadow the devil.
Hold still, you devil!
You're just like your father. And Shadow ultimately judges the humans as not deserving of life, since they don't value life themselves. But at the end, Shadow uses the power of the emeralds to destroy this damn planet.
I'm going to destroy this damn planet. This is who I am.
You've done it? Congratulations on the successful genocide route. So that's what happens in the pure dark story, but what happens in the hero story? Wait, let me adjust my lighting. Yeah, I think blue is heroic. It's just like Sonic! Whoa! So this game starts off much the same way, with Black Doom giving you that same exact mission, except in this case, you listen to town hero Sonic the Hedgehog, fellow father of the president, and you spend most of the game with Sonic, doing missions of good. You are not fighting the military, you are fighting the aliens. After Shadow gets about the third emerald, I think Black Doom catches on that you're not gonna join his side in destroying Earth, and instead, he sends the big monster Black Bull after you, which you take down with Sonic the Hedgehog, who, by the way, talks the entire time. I love Sonic. I love Sonic so much. But in the hero route of this game, he does not shut up.
Hey, check you out, big guy. Let's have some fun. That thing's rubbery body seems immune to most attacks. You need to find out its weak spot. Yeah, smash him up. Yeah, you'll kick this thing's butt in no time. Hey, not bad. Yes, and aligned with you.
It's honestly a little bit annoying, which I'm not mad at. I think that's great, because if this game is from Shadow's perspective, and this is how Shadow constantly perceives Sonic,
Woohoo! Now we're talking. Bring it on.
oh boy, does this put things into perspective.
What's up, Shadow?
Not you again.
Eventually, the aliens get pushed into the jungle and Shadow goes after them. The gun commander is still very convinced at this point that Shadow is still working with the aliens, even though at this point you've been following good missions. Come on, Tower, catch up. Shadow and his best friend Sonic the Hedgehog have been killing more aliens than all of Gun combined. After fighting the aliens, Sonic picks Shadow up like, wanna go up to space to fight the aliens? Chili dogs, or whatever the fuck he says. And Shadow finds the next Chaos Emerald. It is super easy easy, by the way. It's like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by him.
This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
I've seen people talk about this line like, oh, we shouldn't take it as indicative of Shadow's character at all, like it's from the evil route. No, this is from the pure hero route. At his purest of heart, he is stealing candy from babies, which is fine by him. Now, I know what he's trying to say here. What he is trying to say is that stealing the emerald is as easy as if he were taking candy from a baby, and that ease by which he is taking the emerald is fine by him. But that's not how it sounds to our ears. That's not what it feels like he's saying. This isn't the only instance of a quirk in phrasing that feels like a very weird translation of the original Japanese. Like, there are a couple of instances in this game where the things that they say just don't sound right to an American ear. One example is this.
Disgusting black creatures, get out of my sight.
That doesn't sound right. The aliens aren't even black, they're like a dark green. Anyways, he steals the Chaos Emerald, the alarm goes off, which gives Shadow a PTSD flashback to this one time that alarms went off on the Space Colony Ark. And this is a level inside of a flashback. And you get to play as Maria, who is helping Shadow fight by slapping people. Good for her! She makes it look so easy.
Shadow, killing these aliens is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
That's my Maria. How is that? Is it better than my Sonic? You also get another cutscene of Maria dying, but in this one, she's like crawling on the floor towards the tube, which is very brutal. Like, Shadow watched the light leave her eyes before he went to Earth. Oof. So, Sonic interrupts Shadow's war flashbacking to tell you that the Black Comet has shown up, and Shadow confirms that he feels some kind of psychic connection to it.
Black Comet.
Shadow, what's wrong?
Shadow and Sonic then confront Black Doom on the comet, with Shadow shouting that he will protect the planet that Maria loved. And then, you and Sonic get an A rank in killing your dad. And that's the hero route. Congratulations! You and Sonic the Hedgehog are best friends and you just saved the world. In this story, you quite literally get to choose between being a terrorist who destroys the world or helping Sonic and the military fight the terrorists. Now, there are a lot of funny things about the neutral routes. I feel like you spend most of the routes with everyone, including Black Doom, just nagging Shadow to listen to them while Shadow just walks away like, I do what I want.
You've deliberately disobeyed me, Shadow.
No one tells me what to do.
Aliens have descended from the skies and are eating people, and Shadow just like, he just wants to remember what happened last month, you know? Not his circus, not his monkeys. Some of the neutral routes are actually all about Eggman, because Eggman doesn't really want to help the heroes, but he's also been watching the Shadow05 opening cinematic on his TV this whole time, and he knows that the world is going to be destroyed, and he can't take over the world if Black Doom destroys it. In one of these routes, Shadow actually ends up confronted by a bunch of the Shadow androids, and he's just like, am I an android too? And obviously this gives Shadow a crisis. Imagine if you woke up with no memory of yourself and then you met 80 identical robot versions of yourself. You'd be like, oh shit, maybe I'm a robot. So Shadow asks Eggman about it. He's like, am I a robot? And Eggman says, yes.
Doctor, please, I need to know. Those androids, the ones that look like me, am I?
Yes.
What?
Eggman is such a little bitch. Shadow is not a robot. Eggman is lying. He is so messy. He sees Shadow having an existential crisis, and with like no skin in the game, he's just like, yes, Shadow, you are a robot. You did die. He's just like, you know what would be so fucking funny? You know what would ruin his whole fucking week? Shout out to Eggman, making problems on purpose. No notes. It's kind of funny. I don't even know why he does this. It is, in fact, a narrative cul-de-sac. It goes nowhere. But Shadow believes him. He becomes convinced that the real Shadow the Hedgehog died at the end of Sonic Adventure 2, and that he is a fake robot created by Eggman.
The pieces are coming together.
I've connected the two dots.
You didn't connect shit, but
I've connected them.
The first thing that Shadow does upon finding out that Eggman might have created him, and thus might be his dad, is try to kill him, which I find really funny.
Doctor, You're going straight to the place you created me from.
Aw, Shadow, you can say it. You're a big boy.
You're going straight to hell.
Fuck yeah, he said it! So there are various endings in the neutral routes, obviously. I think the most notable one here is that he takes what Eggman told him and makes it his whole personality. He's like, if I'm gonna be a robot, I'm gonna be a robot overlord.
I made you, and this is how you repay me?
I am Shadow Android, the ultimate battle life form created by Eggman. You may have created me, Doctor, but I will now lead this empire and androids will rule. This is who I am.
He usually karate chops Eggman to death in the end of the robot endings.
Goodbye, Doctor.
There's also a variant ending where he kills Black Doom and he's like, I won't let you kill the humans because I'm gonna kill them myself. Ha ha ha. There is this one ending where Sonic is like, Shadow, why are you doing this? Chili dogs. And he's like, Shadow, why are you siding with the evil aliens? And Shadow's like, because they're against you. And I don't like you. If saving humanity means that Sonic the Hedgehog gets something he wants, then humanity needs to go. There's also an ending where Shadow says he's gonna kill himself.
I am Shadow the Hedgehog, a research experiment gone deadly wrong. I've caused so much destruction. I should never have been created. This is who I am.
And Vector's like, no, don't do that. Yet.
Hey, don't go there! Yet, things may not be what they seem. You could be.
He's like, Shadow, at least wait until the 4th Sonic movie comes out. I think they're gonna really cook with this one. It'll be worth sticking around for. He just says yet and then lets Shadow walk away. It's like when an acquaintance that you don't know very well, like, trauma dumps to you, and you gotta be like, there. But you know you're not really helping.
No, don't kill yourself. You're so sexy. Ha 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 ha.
My favorite thing is that at the ranking screen at the end of this last mission, you get this. You get this.
This is what I must do for my atonement.
Vector's little jig in the background while Shadow says, I need to atone for my sins it's crazy. I fucking love this game.
Hey Shadow, you sound really down. Have you tried the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp? I'm
joking. This video is not sponsored by BetterHelp. But God, can you imagine? Now that would be the Hana Hyperfixate's dark route. But, guys, I do have news. This video is sponsored. That's right, guys. I did it. I sold out. I've been trying to sell out for years. Fuck yeah! I've done it! I am morally gray. I don't care about good or evil. I'm just like Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, I gotta get my evil lighting back one moment we do this. Yeah! Okay, let's do this! Much better. Now, let's see what corporate overlord has contributed to this video. Well, it's a small artist selling their stickers. They're like really good stickers. This video is sponsored by the Cryptid Sticker Club, which is a service that sends you fantasy, cryptid/creature themed stickers every month for just like a few bucks. If you go to a convention and you get stickers from a local artist, or if you get them on Etsy, oftentimes they cost $3, $4, $5. For $4 a month, you can get 1 to 2 stickers in the mail sent to you, and they're actually really cute. I love them. I currently have one on my laptop. The stickers have a wide variety of sizes, of finishes, the designs are unique, and I confirmed with the artists themselves that these stickers are not made with AI. I was sent a video of the artist's art process, so if that's not something that you want to support, you don't gotta worry about that. Seriously, this is just like a good, fun little service. You spend a couple dollars, you get good stickers. I think that's great. I have a link in the description and also on the screen right now. Please sign up. The stickers are mailed straight to you, and you actually get some say in the designs if you sign up. It's the small things in life that spark joy. And look, man, I'm not making any medicinal or mental health claims about these stickers or any promises like that, but they'll probably do a better job at stopping you from killing yourself than BetterHelp would. No, BetterHelp, don't sue me. You're so sexy, haha.
Have you tried subscribing to Cryptid Sticker Club? I really think it could help you out of the funk you're in.
Oh wow, The Cryptid Sticker Club has given me something fun to look forward to. It is a small joy that helps me make it through the rough times. And this adorable little Mothman sticker really puts everything into perspective. Thank you, Vector. You really saved my life, just like the Frail we sang about.
So, where was I? Oh yeah. So at the very end of the game, after you've exhausted all the other options, you finally unlock the true ending. And this is the only real canon ending. And this is how it goes. So after Shadow has gathered all the Chaos Emeralds, he goes up to the Black Comet, and Black Doom is there, and all of Shadow's friends have gathered round, and they're like, Shadow, you can't trust him. You might not have put this together from his whole vibe and his character design and everything he says and also his general demeanor, but actually the guy named Black Doom is evil and he wants to destroy all of humanity. Black Doom explains that the humans are already on the path to destroying themselves through their own greed and destructive tendencies. He also reveals that he isn't even trying to kill the humans.
Humans are a great energy source for us. They will be well kept.
Ugh. Is this Vor? Black Doom uses Chaos Control to land the comet in the middle of the city, using the emeralds that Shadow has gathered. From here, Black Doom decides to finally give this boy some context, and he explains his backstory. Explains that he made a deal with Gerald, who was desperate to save his granddaughter. Gerald promised Black Doom that he would help him in his world conquest by gathering the Chaos Emeralds, but at the time, Gerald was planning to later double-cross Black Doom by shooting the Black Comet with the Eclipse cannon when it came back. But, of course, that was assuming that nothing would happen to, I don't know, impair Gerald's judgment and make him want to destroy the world himself. After explaining all this, Black Doom then adds bioterrorism to the list of terrorisms and releases a neurotoxin gas that paralyzes all of Shadow's acquaintances for them to get vored by his alien babies. Shadow hates this and fights back, and then Black Doom pulls the same shit as every emotionally abusive mother and says, I gave you life and this is how you repay me? What is this guilt tripping? Shadow didn't ask to be born, he was a science project. Also, why are you acting like you gave birth to him? Shadow the Hedgehog, I carried you for 9 months in some tube made by some old guy in space, and this is how you treat me? Sir, you left that child behind. For 50 years, you jizzed in a cup and you bounced. You were never there for him. Black Doom's not the dad who stepped up. He's the dad who got his steps in. Then he uses his evil alien powers on Shadow, and he explains to Shadow that because Black Doom is the source of the blood that runs through his veins, he can actually control him. But then the absolute goats, the Chaotix, they send a message that was recorded by Gerald and Maria back when they were alive, basically telling Shadow that he is humanity's one true hope, that he was made to protect humanity, and that Gerald believes that he's the one who could defeat Black Doom. And that, along with the power of self-actualization and love, motivates Shadow to fight back against his dad. He breaks out of Black Doom's control, and then he fights him while all of his friends shout words of affirmation. You got this, Shadow, you're the coolest. You kill your dad, Shadow. And this is also the part where Eggman is like, by the way, remember when I said that you were an android? Tee, I lied.
Can you hear me? This might be the last chance I have to speak to you, so what I said about having created you, it was all a lie.
I was just being silly. I'm so random. I'm a Scorpio moon, I couldn't help it. Shadow defeats Black Doom, he teleports the Black Comet to space where he destroys it with the Eclipse cannon. And while all of your friends cheer you on, the president turns to Commander Tower and he's like, man, it's fucked up that we killed Professor Gerald given he really was just trying his best and had good intentions. It's almost like if we never killed Maria, none of this bad shit would have happened. And then Shadow leaves behind the photo of Gerald and Maria on the Ark, and he says goodbye to his past, deciding that he will no longer be defined by it. The Black Arms are gone, so I guess that also makes this ending a genocide run, which is fun. At least until the Misery and Anguish tour and Shadow Generations, you don't have to worry about Black Doom ever again. So, we've pinned a lot of things during this discussion, and it's given us a lot to think about. But before we proceed, this is as good a time as any to establish. Is gun a metaphor for the US military? That's something I think we really need to make clear because I mentioned that in my last video and a few people disagreed in the comments. And I want to take that in stride, you know, I'm not perfect, God knows I make mistakes. Half of that last video, my dyslexic ass kept reading Siberia as Serbia in the script, which is very embarrassing. So let's look at what evidence we have and figure it out. Firstly, gun is mostly operating in the country known as the United Federation. Is the United Federation an allegory for the US? Well, the United Federation includes several areas seemingly based on US cities, such as Central City being based off of San Francisco. It has a red, white, and blue flag with white stars. It has a president that looks like this, who works in an Oval Office in a house called the White House. It has an intelligence organization called the CIA, and also it's called the United Federation. I think, come on, it goes without saying that this is more or less the US with the serial numbers shaved off. So how can we tell if gun is the military specifically for the United Federation? Well, gun logos pretty clearly emulate the United Federation flag in their design, and also their new logo matches up with imagery associated with the US military, and they seem to defer to the president as an authority figure in Shadow05. They go out of their way to save him, even as other world leaders are under risk. Also, when the president is talking to the commander about the Federation, he calls it, quote, our country. When you hack into the mainframe of the United Federation, Black Doom says that the government put defenses in there, and all the defenses you fight are gun defenses. Furthermore, Rouge, a gun agent, describes herself as working for the president in Sonic Battle, and in Sonic Adventure 2, she speaks directly to the president as though he is her boss commanding her. Gun looks like the US military, they act like the US military, and of course, the description of levels where Sonic runs away from Gun state the mission as escape from the military. What I think is at the root of a lot of people's hangups here is that GUN stands for Guardian Unit of Nations. But I think that this might actually have come from a translation. In the original Sonic Adventure 2 Hero Dark Manual book, they refer to GUN several times as the Guardian Units of Nation. They also refer to it as, quote, the National Defense Force of the United Federation, a military force for, quote, domestic conflicts. GUN is also referred to as the National Defense Force in the Japanese version of Shadow Generation's Dark Beginnings. But I would be remiss if I don't point out that this doesn't exclude the possibility that GUN could be some kind of international defense force, similar to Interpol. We do see GUN operate in other established nations like Soliana, and in protecting the entire world from international threats and aliens. But if that makes you go, why would the United Federation's military be up in the business of other countries? Well, you've basically described the US military. So all this doesn't exclude GUN from being some kind of international defense corps, but I still think that GUN also operates as a United Federation's military force. And their capacity as a military for the United Federation, which we've already established is an analog for the United States, is how I'll be discussing GUN a lot in this video, so I just want to be clear. You can argue with me in the comments, but I hope I at least explained my reasoning well enough. Like, I hope I don't sound like I'm pulling this out of my ass. And I understand why some people push back on this point. As one comment put it on my last video, they don't understand why I need to make these games political. And I guess I see where you're coming from, but guys, for the purpose of this video about this game, if you don't think that a game in which Shadow the Hedgehog, a character whose motivations stem from watching his disabled best friend / sister be gunned down by militaristic violence in front of him, is sought after by a group that is attempting terrorism attacks and an assassination of world leaders, including the president, isn't political? Bro, there might not be any helping you. And I want to clarify GUN's role in this game, because after this game, at least in some capacity, Shadow goes on to work with GUN. During the expert mode of Shadow05, Shadow is in training to join GUN. The commander and Shadow have made up. It's all water under the bridge. Hey, remember when he tried to shoot you in the face?
Justice is served!
It's fine. He's forgiven you. He's a grandpa now. And it's time for Shadow the Hedgehog to become a Marine. Even your dads cheer you on because you have messages from both Gerald and Black Doom, and also Maria, who I should remind you are all dead at this point. which means that the canonness of this section of the game is called into question. But we can't deny that at least by the next game, by the next mainline game in the series, Shadow is operating with Gunn, taking orders from Gunn, and using Gunn military vehicles to complete his missions. This is a strange decision, right? Especially when compared to the way that Gunn was regarded in Sonic Adventure 2. In the story of that game, Gunn was considered to be a main source of conflict. Their violence and overreach are what set Gerald, and by extension Shadow, on a course for revenge against humanity, a course that put the entire world at risk. Innocent people were killed, a government cover-up hid the deaths away, and beloved mascot Sonic the Hedgehog was wrongly imprisoned. But in Shadow05, Gunn is, quote, on our side. They are one of the only things protecting us from the invasion on United Federation soil. Gunn isn't shown in an exclusively heroic light in this game, but Sonic the Hedgehog does specifically tell you that our goals align when we play the hero routes. They are assigned heroic by the narrative, and by the heroism to evil chart that you fill out as you play. And by the next game, Shadow, who has suffered at their hands more than just about anyone else, is now a member of the armed forces. And the audience is expected to take this in stride. He's only had his memory back for about 30 minutes, but hey, he's a Patriot. We're not gonna think too much about his past. I'm sure Gunn doesn't even care that he's an alien hybrid anymore. Hey, don't ask, don't tell! The sins of Gunn aren't forgotten in this game. Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 definitely reminds you of them, but this outcome suggests that they're at least partly forgiven. So what could be behind the narrative decision to work in tandem with Gunn in the hero routes of this game? Why is the conflict of Shadow05 at its core about whether or not you will help the military in fighting a terrorist group? Surely there wasn't some kind of, I don't know, monumental event that impacted how the military was portrayed in just about every facet of popular culture in the world, right? Am I forgetting something? Huh. So, this is the story of Shadow the Hedgehog, at least from some perspectives. Sorry if you've heard this one before. An alien entity has attacked the land of the free. They target and destroy beloved landmarks and symbols of freedom. They seek to spread terror, to cause chaos, to assassinate world leaders, and buildings that once stood strong as a symbol of this country's might have been toppled to the ground. Unopposed, they will destroy all we love. Some cities suffer more than others. Westopolis, a shining beacon of the West, a crown of the United Federation, has suffered the greatest casualties because of its weakened defense system. Without a strong defense, without a strong military presence, this is what happens. And if you don't prepare, what will you do when the enemy attacks? Not if, but when. It's because of the brave men on the front lines, the ones who truly take on the evil we are up against, that we're able to persevere. And thank God for that. Thank God that they're on the ground, evacuating the cities and protecting the people. I mean, look at what happened to Central City. The enemy destroyed the entire region, but we were able to save them all. I shudder to think about what could have happened if we weren't there, after the explosion shook those buildings to the floor, collapsed them all until they were nothing but rubble and a cloud of dust. Because these invaders are relentless. They want to feed off of our resources. No, they want to feed off of our very lives. They're parasites. So tell us, Shadow, whose side are you on? You're either with us or you're with the enemy.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy. You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear.
The choice is yours. So, 9/11 changed everything, didn't it? If you live in the United States, and even in some degree if you don't live in the United States, you were still impacted, if by nothing else than by the trends that happened in media. Famously, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, scenes were deleted from movies and video games that were seen as being in poor taste, as too evocative of the Twin Towers falling, especially for an American audience for which the grief and tragedy was still incredibly fresh. Like, I'm sure most of you know about the scene of a plane flying through skyscrapers that needed to be scrapped from Lilo and Stitch before release. But it didn't stop there. Law & Order had an entire multi-episode arc about stopping a terrorist that needed to be scrapped. Starbucks had to scrap a very unfortunate and incredibly tone-deaf poster, including a dragonfly dive-bombing into 2 summer beverages. And dozens of shows from The Amanda Show to Power Rangers had episodes that were either edited or taken out of circulation, including an episode of The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, the 1993 series, that had an episode taken out of syndication because it featured Robotnik doing a terror attack and planting a bomb at an airport.
We're gonna get to hear a sonic boom!
But it didn't just impact American media, Japanese companies had to do it too because they sold products in the States. Metal Gear Solid 2 was famously gutted of scenes, including an aircraft being crashed into New York. It's a miracle that that game even made it to the sales floor with all the stuff that they had to change at the very last second. And it's no wonder why companies around the world were scrambling to make changes. America is the largest consumer of just about everything, and they were grieving. I know people make 9/11 jokes these days like they're going out of style, but people were very much traumatized. It was a traumatic event that unfolded live on our televisions. If you live in an American city, there is a very big chance that you have a 9/11 memorial local to you, no matter how far away from New York you might live. Hell, Confusion Hill has a 9/11 memorial. The Redwood Forest roadside tourist trap, they don't have a cell phone signal, but they have a 9/11 memorial. They just stapled a sign to 2 trees that were next to each other. I'm not even kidding. Grief is a wild thing. And to avoid clashing with that grief, a lot of art released between the late 2001 and 2003 was adjusted on the fly, mid-development, in the middle of their production cycles. But after 2003 came a lot of movies and games and TV shows that had completely post-9/11 production cycles. And by the time those were released, the United States didn't quite want to grieve anymore. Instead, the United States wanted catharsis. Stories about military, government, law enforcement agents got really popular on TV and in movies. I mean, they were popular before this, but after 9/11 and in the mid-2000s, the genre became an American staple. Specifically, crime thrillers where the agents track down the most evil of criminals, where they prevent an attack from the enemy. These are shows about American law enforcement and special operatives taking down assailants and murderers and rapists, and sometimes even terrorists, and, of course, defeating them. It fulfills this fantasy of defeating evil itself. On its heels was the resurgence of the disaster movie. While disaster movies were more commonplace in the 90s as a fun action summer film subgenre, the return of the disaster movie after 9/11 carried a different tone, a different weight, where it's treated with gravitas and tragedy, and there was catharsis to be found through the people who survived to witness the aftermath.
There is cause for hope. Only a few hours ago, I received word that a small group of people survived in New York City, against all odds and in the face of tremendous adversity.
On top of that, movies where invading forces, outsiders from our world, attack, but in the end are overcome, sometimes seemingly by divine intervention.
They were undone by the tiniest creatures that God in his wisdom put upon this earth.
It's a fantasy of defeating mass death itself, good prevailing over evil, order over chaos. These narratives are not exclusive to the era after 9/11, but they resonated in a way that they didn't quite before for contemporary audiences. American audiences had now, in living memory, bore witness to unimaginable levels of mass death and terror, and so these types of movies and television shows did phenomenally well, because it's what a lot of Americans needed at the time. None of these movies or shows are about 9/11, and many of them had probably been written with no intentional allusion to the disaster, but they're all made in the after image of it. One might say they never forgot. The American public wasn't shying away from these themes anymore. In fact, after 2002 and through the rest of the 2010s, they were embracing it. The focus shifted from the trauma of the tower's fall to the war in Afghanistan and eventually in Iraq. framed as justified payback. In a surge of jingoism, surviving 9/11 and living to fight back was made a part of the American identity. Also, it kind of ruined country music.
We'll put a boot in your ass, it's the American way. This country's just out looking for a fight. Have you forgotten?
Where were you when the world stopped turning that September day? I watched CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran.
Then the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist.
We had done the grieving, now came the anger. We had been traumatized, and now came the time to fight back.
And we get back at them! We get back at them!
And this was made even more apparent in gaming media. 9/11, for all its faults, was great for the first-person shooter industry. Was 9/11 the only catalyst? No, Halo was in development well before 9/11, but it was released after, and it can't be denied that 9/11 impacted our buying habits and the kinds of media that Americans had an appetite for. Call of Duty is a multi-billion-dollar franchise, and it started in 2003. I think by the time Call of Duty Black Ops came out, it was in like 1 in 8 American households. As the country was rallying itself for the fight, people were enlisting in the military en masse, and the kinds of games that people back home played were an extension of that. The foothold that the military-industrial complex had in the gaming industry was a self-sustaining ecosystem. Do you want to feel strong? Do you want power and glory over American enemies? Buy this game. Do you want to run the game that gives you glory? You'll need this processor. And when you're done playing your little video games, you can make a difference. Join the armed forces. And if you can't join the military, but you still want to show your support of the troops to enjoy all the fun heroism of fighting our country's enemies from the comfort of your home, boy oh boy do we have a game for you. And another, and another, and another. By 2003, the United States was well into the war on terror and was gearing up to go to another country in the Middle East, and so these video games gave Americans a catharsis. They attack, we stop the bad guy, we get revenge. In his book, Playing War, Military Video Games After 9/11, Matthew Thomas Paine describes the foothold that military entertainment had in the gaming industry, and how the grief of 9/11 was utilized by the gaming industry to fuel something much more marketable. The militainment shooter. A game type that melds all of the joy of getting vengeance against America's enemies with all the fun and addictive nature of video games in a myriad of genres. Oftentimes, militainment games aren't only realistic first-person military shooters. They often branch out into sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. Because militainment isn't always just about the military. It is often about the enemy. It's like the enemy in scary films. Oftentimes, the monster isn't just a monster, the monster is a metaphor. Sometimes the monster is really outsiders or a fear of the plague. Sometimes the monster is the spectacle of trauma and social media. Sometimes the monster is lesbians. Whatever society is most afraid of at the time. Militainment operates in a similar way in gaming. Maybe you're fighting the Nazis or the Soviets that strive to change your free way of life. Maybe you're taking down endless waves of aliens from another world, outsiders who want to kill you and people like you. Maybe you're fighting fear itself, an attack from an unseen enemy that tears your people apart, something almost paranormal in its evil. All of these things, from the alien to the foreign to the supernatural, they all provide catharsis, consciously or unconsciously, to a population that has been traumatized by a terror attack. The specifics don't matter. Just as long as you infiltrate, dominate, and ultimately annihilate your enemy. Even when you aren't fighting the terrorists, oftentimes you are fighting the terrorists, and these games make a lot of money providing that experience. And it isn't hard to see the visual shorthand being used to subconsciously send that message. It's often very easy to see who specific groups represent. And what do the black arms represent in Shadow the Hedgehog? I don't even need to tell you, because the game will tell you for me. Subtlety is for cowards. You might think it's an exaggeration to call Shadow 2005 a militainment game, but I think it has all of the hallmarks that Paine describes in his book. The translation of an unimaginable terror attack into a fun, wacky video game about a genetically modified hedgehog fighting his dad is not as much of a stretch as you might think. Militainment often thrives in what is lost in translation, in transforming the trauma into something more palatable. As Payne says in his book,
in reconfiguring unforgettable and unalterable televisual images of terror into play prompts, and by transforming fear into fun, the military shooter is the perfect platform for post-9/11 military power fantasies. The primary call to action is to exercise deadly force repeatedly without fear of moral or legal repercussions. The military shooter functions as a kind of ludic antidote to the meditated shock and awe of the 9/11 attacks.
The indirect nature is intentional. Many Americans, even at the height of their jingoism and their search for revenge and catharsis to process their grief, did not want to think about the military going to Iraq because war is messy. And also because if you thought too hard about it, you might remember that Al-Qaeda wasn't even in Iraq. And why are we in Iraq again? They never did find those weapons of mass destruction, did they? Even with the war in Afghanistan, a war that initially had very strong support from the American people in the immediate months after 9/11, the years were starting to drag on and on. As news came back of the deaths of thousands and thousands of Afghan civilians, and let's face it, more importantly to Americans, the death of hundreds of American military personnel, there was still no end in sight, and the war was getting increasingly more messy and controversial in the eyes of the American people, even as American media tended to brush the death reports of the collateral damage under the table. But here is a game with a story where you can turn your brain off and enjoy taking down the obviously evil aliens who want to do a nondescript metropolitan area harm. That's what Militainment offers you. A war without baggage, without a real death toll, against an obvious enemy who you know deserves it. I mean, for God's sake, his name is Black Doom. There's nothing complicated here. The aliens want to eat us, and we can stop it. To capitalize on American audiences who are chasing this catharsis without being seen as offensive, companies often had to toe this very careful line. Referencing 9/11 too directly in your movie or TV show or video game might be seen as being in poor taste. Payne points out in this book, interestingly, that in the same era that movies about imminent invasions and disasters were enjoying a post-9/11 box office boom, movies about war specifically were on the decline. So metaphors were key. We wanted to look at tragedy, but not directly. People didn't want to forget, but they didn't want to remember too closely either. And that brings us to Sega, in the years leading up to 2005 when the game Shadow the Hedgehog is in development. Sega is making the next popular Sonic the Hedgehog game, a game aimed at teens and preteens, a more mature audience, an audience that was too busy peer pressuring itself into thinking that it was getting too old for Sonic the Hedgehog, whatever the hell that means. It goes without saying, but obviously, Sega wasn't trying to make a game that helped people cope with 9/11 or galvanized Americans into fighting the war on terror. They were just making a game about their little Technicolor animals aimed at that fickle 10 to 14-year-old boy demographic, a game that followed popular trends. And these were where the trends were. These are the choices that consumers were making, even if they weren't conscious decisions. Honestly, it's undeniable at this point that Sega loves trying things that are popular in the gaming industry ecosystem, mimicking the design choices of popular games like Breath of the Wild, Mario Galaxy, like Fall Guys. And mimicry isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it doesn't necessarily make these video games bad, but my point more so is that Sonic Team is no stranger to emulating what they have already seen succeed elsewhere. Hell, most video game companies who aim to make a profit are no stranger to this. Sometimes you try to make a fun video game about a furry little guy, and you end up inadvertently contributing to the military-industrial complex's chokehold on the mid-2000s video game industry. Oops. It is no coincidence that Sega pivoted from the Adventure series and Sonic Heroes away from the speed platformer to a third-person shooter featuring the military, just as military shooters were becoming one of the fastest-growing gaming genres in the world. It is no coincidence that when planning the action sequences of this game, the images of devastation and destruction mimic some of the highest-grossing thrilling movies from the period. It works well in popular media, why wouldn't it work well here? The game design choices of Shadow 2005 aren't directly tied to 9/11, but they might as well be. There's also the story to consider. It's a Sonic the Hedgehog game where foreign terrorists attack a highly populated western city called Westopolis. In what universe does this exist in a non-post 9/11 world? The terrorists attack on all fronts. There's a cyber attack. They release toxins into the air. They attack from the skies above. Protecting the country from these kinds of threats were the highest priority of the US after 9/11, and a huge source of anxiety for the American people. The public did not know where or when or how the terrorists would attack next, but they were on high alert that it could happen anytime. Would it be through our computers? Would it be bioterrorism? Would it be a poison in our water supply? Did Al-Qaeda have drones? Could they strike today? So I don't know how someone can play this game and not see the impact of the era on it. So much so that in retrospect, it makes me question some script choices that I'm pretty certain aren't what I think they are, but it has me overthinking. There's this one cutscene, I think it's on one of the neutral routes, when the president is being saved from the White House, on account of the imminent attack on United Federation soil, and he says something along the lines of,
"Once again, I have failed my duty to protect our nation."
Once again? Sir? I know he's probably talking about maybe the aliens attacking earlier on in this game, or maybe he's talking about Sonic Adventure 2, how things almost got really bad even though they didn't, or maybe he's even talking about chaos attacking in Sonic Adventure. Maybe that's what he means. But there's a part of me that sees this and can't help but wonder, is he talking about 9/11? It's not like 9/11 happened in Sonic's world, right? I mean, if so, Shadow's in for a shock because he woke up from that tube in 2003 with no memory of what happened before. He has no idea. Someone's gotta tell him.
Oh boy, Empire City! It is great to be back in the hustle and bustle of the Big Chow Fruits. Come on, Shadow, follow me! I know a great chili dog place just up the road from here. Shadow?
Sonic, where are they?
Where
did they go, Sonic?
The evocation of terrorism, specifically in Shadow05, and the way Gunn and the Federation prevail against terrorism, with Shadow's help of course, corresponds well to another hallmark of militainment games, described by Matthew Payne in Playing War.
Military shooters reinscribe 9/11's cultural memory into their ludic wars not for the sake of predictive accuracy, but to give players hope that these reimagined 9/11s can have different outcomes than their horrific urtext. This explains why so many shooters possess fearful narratives that take place immediately before or directly after attacks on the United States.
So much of this game fulfills a cathartic fantasy of preventing terrorism. The president makes it out okay, Central City is evacuated, everyone lives, and in the end they kill all of the invaders, except for the one that Shadow forgot about on the Ark that turns into Black Doom 2.0 in Shadow Generations, but we didn't know about that one in 2005. And we prevent the possibility of it ever happening again. That being said, while I think that introducing terrorism as an existential threat to the United Federation is very notable, another way 9/11 impacted the Sonic franchise, and one I find just as interesting, is the way that the stories of the games treat Gunn's place in this world. As I mentioned, by the time we get to the post-9/11 story of Shadow 2005, Gunn is no longer the obvious enemy of our protagonists. They are no longer a commentary on government overreach or military intervention. It's a pretty bold switch-up considering not only the way they changed Gunn's narrative in these games, but also the way Sonic and his friends have in the past treated Gunn. In Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic has no qualms about fighting the Gunn agents. Hell, the very first thing he does is take out all of the agents on board.
He's taken out everyone aboard and what's wrong?
And I know a lot of Sonic's voice lines in these games are about cops specifically, but the people he fight on screen oftentimes have gun uniforms on. Sonic either doesn't know the difference between a cop and a gun agent, or he does not care about the distinction. And who can blame him? In this game, Gunn didn't ask Sonic any fucking questions. They just arrested him, seemingly in the middle of the first recap at the beginning of the game.
What's this? Handcuffs? Wait a minute, what are you talking about? I'm not a deserter from any military facility.
They apparently accuse him of being a military deserter? Is that what they would have arrested Shadow for? Not for the robberies or the murders or killing that guy, but for going AWOL? Military desertion is when someone in the service leaves their post. Is this his post? Being in the tube? It also makes no sense since they supposedly think Sonic is the one committing these crimes, not Shadow. So why would they arrest him for desertion instead of like armed robbery or something? There is a popular fan theory that's been around since like forever that says that Gunn is intentionally framing Sonic for Shadow's crimes here. You know how Project Shadow ended with every scientist on the Ark being shot by the military and all evidence of it existing being wiped off the face of the Earth? Well, someone is going around robbing all these banks and breaking into all these government bases while being shaped like a hedgehog. And the government needs to say something to the public, and they can't blame Shadow. How can you blame something that supposedly doesn't exist? So some people theorize that Gunn is instead framing Sonic here to save face. No, that isn't a secret government hedgehog that we've been keeping in a tube for 50 years using your taxpayer dollars. That's just Sonic. You know Sonic. The Hedgehog? The guy who saved us all from Noah's flood last month? Yeah, him. He's evil now. Now, is that canon? I don't think so, and I don't want to claim directly that it is canon, unless it was confirmed somewhere, but I might have missed it. Listen, there's almost 35 years of existing Sonic the Hedgehog lore. This is a very difficult franchise to know everything about. So if I get something wrong, I hope that people will just patiently correct me in the comments below. I'll add any corrections and notes to the comment pinned at the top. Just, politely tell me, okay? But if this theory was canon, it would make sense. But assuming Sonic Adventure 2 is playing it straight and Gunn just thinks that Sonic is evil now, it should be said that Gunn spares no expense and no show of force, probably literally killing people and causing immense damage in the pursuit of a single blue hedgehog who doesn't fall into line. You think this game considers these people to be morally neutral? The people who shot the little sick girl and is plowing into pedestrians? The people called Gunn? Funnily enough, because there is no canon gameplay route in the middle of Shadow 05, that means that canonically, I'm pretty sure that Tails has killed more members of law enforcement in these games than Shadow has. Tell me if I'm wrong about that, but that might be the case. So we go from that in Sonic Adventure 2 to Shadow 05. Sonic goes from saying this about law enforcement mid-2001
Sheesh. There always seems to be a lot of police around when you don't need them.
to saying this in 2005.
Take off Gunn. What looks like using homing attacks on those robots is the only way back.
Sonic, the fuck are you talking about? Ticking off authority figures is your favorite thing in the world. The same organization that is accusing Shadow of being an accessory to a terrorist group that is dropping bombs from above in a highly populated area did the same thing to Shadow on Radical Highway in the game that was released before 9/11. We are meant to trust that the same organization that has previously wrongly imprisoned Sonic the Hedgehog is now on the side of good, and Sonic is working with them, or at least towards the same goal as them, defending against a common enemy. Any wrongdoings of the military are secondary to the threat that the country now faces. Let's put a pin in that. We can't be sure that the series aimed to be less critical of the military in Shadow 2005 than it was in Sonic Adventure 2, and in fact, I sincerely doubt that this was intentionally the case, but it can't be denied that this game was written and released at a time when it would have been much less popular to be critical of the military. Like we went over, movies and television shows with pro-government and pro-military messaging were generating millions and millions of dollars. There was money to be made in that space. Consciously or not, this is what people in the US were hungry for. And media with messaging even a little bit similar to Sonic Adventure 2, media that leaned just pointedly a little bit anti-police or anti-military, or even just slightly questioned the choices of George Bush and the Afghanistan War or the Iraq War in the years that followed 9/11, those things suffered financially. It didn't matter that the war didn't make sense and that people were dying and that Americans didn't even really understand what we were fighting for and they didn't even have weapons of mass destruction. That's our president and we're all going through a a really hard time right now, and we all gotta stick together or else the terrorists win! Most famously, I can think of the Dixie Chicks. That's their dead name. I think they're now called the Chicks. Who, after making a very milquetoast statement about George W. Bush and saying they didn't want to go to the Iraq War, had their entire careers ruined. They even immediately followed it up with like, but not the troops. We love the troops. The troops are 10 out of 10. But that didn't matter. People destroyed their CDs in the streets. And the Chicks later apologized, but that did not save their careers. They were made pariahs. I honestly don't know if Sega could have made a game like Sonic Adventure 2 in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 and had it be as big of a success. At least not to an audience with these kinds of sensibilities. Sega would, at the very least, need to change a couple of things. This isn't to say that there weren't Americans against the war in Iraq, and protests would go up year after year, and the minority that stood against the Iraq War were very vocal, but the mainstream opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of the wars, especially in 2002 to 2003 when Shadow05 would have been in the middle of development and the story would have been being written. In my opinion, it would have been very difficult to sell Americans a story in which gun is symbolic of government overreach or military intervention in an era where the United States is starting the Iraq War, and the citizens of the United States are boycotting anyone who speaks out against the war, even though a lot of people weren't happy that we were invading Iraq, and also Al-Qaeda wasn't even in Iraq. That's just like a completely different Middle Eastern country, and the US government was still framing it as an attack against terrorism as a whole, and you bet your ass we're gonna put a pin in that. But even though people didn't like the war, in the mainstream you couldn't say it out loud. And why couldn't you say it out loud? Because you're either with us
or you are with the terrorists.
So we can guess and question Sega's motivations in changing how gun is portrayed, but it cannot be questioned that Sega is a multi-million-dollar corporation, and that after 9/11, this is where people lost money, and this is where the money was.
Oh, say, can you see?
As Sonic fans, we need to be capable of appreciating these games while also recognizing that the mega corporation behind the games makes them for money. And also that whether they aim to be political or not, the question of where that money comes from and why consumers spend their money on a specific product often has a political answer. We can recognize both of these things. We can think fast and multitask. It's what Sonic would want us to do. But yeah, mentioning that 4Kids national anthem, that was weird, right?
By the dawn's early light.
It's weird for Sonic the Hedgehog, who hates authority and respects no laws, only freedom, to be singing the United States national anthem, right? Is Sonic the Hedgehog a US citizen? Is Sonic a patriot? And Knuckles is here too? Banner yet wave. The man grew up isolated on an island. How does he even know the national anthem? Guys, I haven't visited the 9/11 didn't happen dimension to check, but I really don't think this TV spot would have existed without 9/11. This is what I mean when I say 9/11 impacted everything. I'm not even the first person to see all of this political messaging in Shadow 2005 story. Hell, I'm not even the first person on YouTube to see all this. And I'm not just talking about that jet bit either.
Now hit the second tower.
After I finished writing this video, I stumbled across a video by HeyandNico456 from like 2 years ago, which took a similar angle on this topic. I have it linked below. That video didn't influence my video at all, but they did it first, so, you know, go send it some love. Anyways, I'll let you guys argue in the comments about what external forces led Sega to make the design decisions they did, but you know what is undeniable? The bonus content of this game, and the story content of future games, sees Shadow the Hedgehog joining Gun. Now, the canonness of this is called into question, but the game at least presents this as an uncritical sign of where Shadow is heading next. The expert mode is our only indication in this game of what Shadow is doing after the events of Shadow05, and of course, in the next mainline Sonic game, Sonic 06, Shadow starts it off on a Gun mission. So even if Shadow joining Gun didn't exactly happen like this, you know, with motivational messages recorded by your dead dads and your dead sister,
I'll be cheering you on.
According to the game's narrative, joining the military is the natural next step for Shadow's path. So this is where things get hairy for me, because if Shadow is joining the military, it means I need to talk about the military-industrial complex. Now, If you want to defend the military part of the military-industrial complex, I understand that impulse. I don't think you need to. The military has the funding and the weaponry to do it themselves. My dinky little video will not hurt the troops. The troops are doing fine. But if you're tempted to go into my comments about it, I will bring up that even the most gung-ho pro-military person will often acknowledge that the military, at its best, even assuming that every person is doing the right thing and just wants to protect our nation, is still an extension of the orders of rich politicians in power, who often do not see combat, but who do benefit directly from the people who do join the military at the bottom, and from the optics of a strong military force. I don't have it in me to add an entire separate thesis on the military in the middle of my Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 video, but I do think that in the age after 9/11, you had a population of high schoolers who had been told their whole life that the moral and correct thing to do was to fight for your country, a country that literally sent soldiers to high schools to recruit students in financially unstable neighborhoods while promising a partially compensated or accelerated education plan in exchange for fighting for your country. So imagine if, hypothetically, the country has recently suffered a terrible terror attack that has galvanized the public into fighting for said country. Regardless of my own feelings, I can 1000% understand how it is that induction into the military skyrocketed around the early to mid-2000s. Now, fighting for and wanting to protect your loved ones, your neighbors, the communities you care about, is good on paper, but the thing about the military as a system is that when you are in the troops and the armed forces of the United States of America, you are not the one calling the shots on how to do that. You don't have a say on if the war that you fight will be considered by future generations as a justified war or as a completely unethical waste of human lives and resources. The soldiers take orders from the captains take orders from the generals take orders from the executive branch, which is kept in power by politicians in the legislative branch. And this is where talking about the military gets dicey. Thank them for their service if you want, but sometimes rich politicians in DC accept money from lobbying groups to give the order for that service to include dropping bombs on villages and mowing down innocent civilians who look like me and my family at the orders of rich people in power, disconnected from what's actually happening in those countries, many of whom will never fucking be on the battlefield, will never experience the trauma that our troops face, or the people who our troops fight will face. All while the troops are being denied decent, affordable healthcare and mental health services. Remember when I said this? The troops are doing fine. Yeah, that was a lie. They're not. But the people actually calling the shots are at fault for that. And the people who want to defend the troops from criticism, I believe, would be better off defending troops from the systems that take advantage of them, rather than from people with small YouTube channels who have notes about imperialism. This is something that even right-wing people know to be true. I'm obviously a leftist, you can see the nose ring, here are my pronouns to scare you away if you've made it this far, but these are things that we can all agree need to be worked on. But that's the military at its best, assuming everyone at the bottom of the chain of command is trying to do the right thing, and assuming they only ever protect innocent people and kill the enemy. And I don't need to describe the military at its worst, because the facts and the headlines will do it for me. 1,300 civilians slaughtered by airstrikes within the first 3 months in Afghanistan after 9/11, and an additional 3,200 civilians starved to death. The Mahmadiyya massacre, which included the rape of a teenager, the tortures and sexual assaults of Iraqis at Abu Ghraib prison, the torture of people who were being held without being accused of a crime at Guantanamo Bay. Stuff that I don't want to recount, both because it really upsets me, but also because this is a YouTube video about Shadow the Hedgehog 2005. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten that. But I need to mention all of this because at the same time that these crimes were being committed by troops, the militainment market of gaming was skyrocketing in the 2000s. Ads to join the Navy were in the same issues of magazines as reviews of SOCOM 3 Navy SEALs. For the love of God, ads to join the Navy were in the same magazine as that Shadow review I mentioned at the start of this video. Ads to join the military aimed at the same teenagers who would play this game alongside other games touting glory in the fight against terrorism. of self-sustaining Ouroboros of financial self-interest and militaristic righteousness. And while it's easy to dismiss these headlines of human rights violations in the Middle East as random crimes done by random bad apple soldiers who do shitty and awful things sometimes, a lot of the actions, like the torture of inmates at Abu Ghraib or at Guantanamo, were orders that came from higher up. Orders that came from generals, that came from the CIA, that trickled down from the cabinet. These were often people following orders. And this is a big bulk of military action. And often, this is the stuff that gets overlooked in our support of the troops for the greater good against the common enemy. Yes, obviously, fictional ambiguous military group GUN from the popular video game Shadow the Hedgehog from the popular gaming franchise Sonic the Hedgehog isn't literally the United States military. To my knowledge, GUN never invaded Iraq or tortured people at Guantanamo who weren't even suspected of crimes. But we just went over how real-world events might have influenced the role of GUN in these games. We went over how corporations benefited from people who felt real catharsis over imagery that reminded them of real enemies being defeated. And we went over how that catharsis helped fuel the galvanization that led to a rise of people joining the armed forces. GUN isn't the US military, but the writers and developers are depending on the audience to think of them in a similar light to make the emotional beats of the story work, and are employing the weaponry and uniforms and visual shorthands that we associate with the military in order to do so. It's why the Dark Route sees Shadow committing an act of cyber terrorism against an organization with the acronym the CIA. It's why the President of the United Federation lives in the White House when they could have had him be fucking anywhere. It's why the landmass that the Eclipse cannon hits looks like the mainland United States, an attack on US soil. When developers reference a political or military group when writing their own political or military group, there are political implications in that choice, whether they want them to have political implications or not. And that impacts how we read the story, and it's anti-intellectualism to claim that it doesn't matter. Also, GUN isn't necessarily doing all of the awful stuff that the real US military has been ordered to do by the real US government, but they've at least done a lot of awful stuff. We've seen them murder innocent civilians and shoot little girls and demand super weapons and kidnap lab-grown sentient creatures and put them in tubes for 50 years and then cover up the entire operation. And we, the audience, are expected to forgive them by the end of Shadow the Hedgehog 2005, or at least to forgive them enough to not be too thrown off when Shadow joins them at the end of the game. Because he needs to protect the Earth, right? Anything they might have done is secondary to stopping the threat. Think about the greater good against the enemy. I am incredibly skeptical of this franchise's recent treatment of GUN for this reason. Like, having Sonic and friends in the movie just agree to go on a gun mission even though they have no reason to trust GUN? Ugh. Having Abraham Tower and Dark Beginnings go out of his way to go, "Wow, Shadow, why are you so hesitant to trust us and not just asking us for the rocket ship to go to the Ark?"
Despite all that's passed between us, he saved the world from Black Doom. He should have known I would have supported him if he asked.
We would have given it to you if you asked. Why on earth would you think we're unreasonable?
Justice is served!
It just raises my hackles every time this franchise tries to treat GUN as either moral or neutral. They are not the good guys. Yes, GUN helped fight the aliens that eat people, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are the good guys. Like, that can't be where the bar is. One could say, yeah, we've seen GUN do evil and corrupt things, but that was the old GUN. It's under new management, and we have no reason to think it's gonna do evil things now. After all, it's Commander Tower's predecessor as head of GUN who did the cover-up and ordered everyone get shot 50 years ago, not him. But that's not how military organizations work. The politicians and generals in charge change constantly, but the chain of command doesn't. The soldiers still need to do what the people at the top tell them to do. Yes, maybe current leader Abraham Tower might be a kind-hearted old man, a mild-mannered grandfather with a good head on his shoulders, which is questionable, but maybe he's mellowed out, who knows. But even if you think that to be the case, he's not going to be in charge of GUN forever. Abraham Tower is pushing 60. Shadow the Hedgehog is very likely immortal, and when the next commander, Worm-Tongue Fascism Face, takes over, the ground troops, including Shadow, will still be expected to follow orders without question. I guess Shadow would just need to go AWOL in that case. I can't believe he's gonna be deserting the military a second time. On paper, there are a few interpretations of Shadow's choice to join Gun that I've seen going around, and a few of them make sense to me and some of them don't. One is that Gun is an organization that will do whatever they need to do to complete their missions, and Shadow's vibe is very do whatever it takes by all means necessary. Shadow isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He will kill a man or two or three. We know this. Like Maria said,
Shadow, give them a chance to be happy.
And yeah, sure, but you get one chance. Meaning, fuck around and find out.
Death to all who oppose me!
If you get in his way, he has no qualms about killing. Not just because he doesn't care about good or evil, he's very ambiguous, yada yada yada, or whatever it is that they say on his Sonic Channel bio, but because he understands the trolley problem. He doesn't care what the philosophers say. It's 1 versus 5. He can do simple math. I think when they say he doesn't care about good or evil, they mean he doesn't care about what you think. He doesn't care about people's assumptions about good or evil. Forget about the optics, get with it, or get out of the damn way. But while I can see that this is a reason why he might join the armed forces, after all, you can't make an American omelet without breaking a few foreign eggs. It still doesn't feel true to him, in my opinion. I know I spent half of this video talking about 9/11 and the war on terror, but this is probably the most controversial part of this video, because there's nothing that Sonic Twitter loves to do more than argue about the characterization of these stupid little furry freaks. Is Sonic cocky? Is Sonic the wind? I don't know, man. I have car payments. So at the risk of ruining my notifications, in my opinion, so much of Shadow's personal arc in this game is about listening to himself and to his own intuition over the orders of other people, over what others are telling him to do. By the end of the game, he is done letting the past command him. He is done letting other people tell him who he is. It isn't lost on me that a lot of Shadow's angst in these mid-2000s games is based on him being possibly created to be a weapon. His story in Sonic Battle is very much rooted in that. Him grappling with the fact that he is a weapon, that he was created on some level for devastation, but also created with free will, and him pondering if those two concepts are compatible. But Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 is themed after the two words, I am. I am Shadow the Hedgehog. I am all of me, and I am all I am. Every story path, regardless of canon, ends with an affirmation. This is who I am. No, this is who I am. Every path is a declaration of identity. This is why I'm not personally someone who really thinks too hard about what the canon route of Shadow05 is. It would be nice to know, and I am curious, but that isn't really the part of the game that matters the most to me. As far as Shadow is concerned by the end of it all, it does not matter what Shadow was created to be. It does not matter who or what Gerald designed him for, or even whether or not Shadow is the original Shadow. For a character so weighed down with the disparate and sometimes contradicting motivations and intentions of other characters, of other governing bodies, of the military, of those who loved him and those who hated him and those who nurtured him and those who abused him alike, Shadow defining his own identity is radical in itself. At the start of the game, Shadow is seeking answers, seeking a mission, seeking an assigned prerogative, and at the end of the game, he makes his own. It isn't about what he does, it's that he discovers the agency to ponder his identity and to make that decision. I think, therefore, I am. It doesn't matter what the choice is, it's the choosing that has the power. So, the idea of Shadow escaping the angst of thinking he's a mindless weapon, discovering that he does not need to be defined by being a weapon, that he can be all he is and figure out for himself what that means, and then settling for being at the disposal of a military force where it's valued that he follows orders from the chain of command without question? It doesn't sit right with me. Shadow being a soldier makes me want to eat the demon core. Shadow is not a cop. He does not respect the law. He has no reason to respect the chain of command that is inherent to joining a military organization. And despite what the framed photo on the president's desk might imply, he doesn't have any allegiance to any government body. And you're telling me that Shadow would follow orders from a bureaucracy? that he would just unquestionably do what he's told. Can you imagine Shadow following orders? Can you imagine Shadow being told to drop and give you 20? Okay, good luck with that. He doesn't even take orders in Shadow05. In the canon true ending, as soon as he finds out his backstory, the first thing he says is, "No one can tell me what to do," or something like that. Look, I'm not a member of the military. I've just seen Cadet Kelly 80 times as part of my queer awakening. But if there's one thing that movie taught me, it's that personal individual freedom and choice aren't valued in your soldiers. Even less so in the don't ask, don't tell era of 2005. In another interpretation of this narrative choice, I've heard it said that Shadow joining Gunn is symbolic of a larger story on forgiveness. But you don't need to join someone's military organization to forgive them. And I'll be honest, just because Shadow says that he's leaving the past behind doesn't mean that he's necessarily forgiven them. Maybe he has, I don't know, I don't have the secrets in his heart, but I don't know, forgiveness is a tall order given they shot his sister and put him in the trauma tube. I just don't see him singing Kumbaya with them in the end. There is one interpretation of Shadow joining Gunn that I actually really like, and it's the idea that Shadow is joining Gunn to keep an eye on them. I don't like the idea of him joining their ranks as an officer, but I can imagine that he doesn't trust them to operate without someone ensuring that that power doesn't land in the wrong hands, making sure that there's never another Ark incident. This interpretation also has an added layer of tragedy to it. Shadow's personal responsibility that he feels for the safety of the Earth is so great that he's willing to join the organization that took everything for him, at the loss of a lot of personal freedom. But I will say that all of that is fan speculation on my part. I don't know if there's a place in the games where Shadow says this outright, unless, again, I'm missing something. Putting aside the fact that Maria was literally a victim of militaristic violence, of a gunshot wound from a man who was just following orders from his commander in a mindless act that benefited no one and protected the country from nothing, whatever reasoning Shadow has for joining Gunn, I don't think that Shadow the Hedgehog fights for a nation, or even for nations if you believe in the Interpol interpretation. I think Shadow fights for the people in those countries. Maria said fight for a chance for people to be happy. She didn't say fight for the economic stability and best interests of the United Federation. But he doesn't just want to fight because of Maria's wish. Remember, he's grown beyond that. Protecting the Earth gives him a purpose and makes him feel fulfilled. It's the first real choice that he makes after discovering his full backstory, to protect the people of this planet. Sure, he'll do anything to meet his goals and complete his missions. He might even be willing to cause some property damage and destruction, or hurt you, or even kill someone if they get in his way, but he won't, I don't know, drop missiles on civilians in populated cities in Yemen because Joe Biden or Donald Trump told him to in the name of protecting the free world. I don't even think I'm the only one who has issues with Shadow officially joining Gunn, because Sega, in recent years, has gone in the direction to make it clear that Shadow is not a full-time Gunn agent. According to a recent interview with Takashi Iizuka, who was core in the creation of Shadow as a character, Shadow doesn't have any kind of stable position with Gunn. He's functionally unemployed. He might have been an agent of Gunn in Sonic 06, but they've walked that back a bit, saying he only freelances with them occasionally when they have mutual goals. And I support this wholeheartedly for the reasons I've already stated. Shadow isn't a patriot. He won't be caught singing the national anthem. He's just using the resources available to him to get the things that he needs to get done. As for Sonic, I'm not completely shocked that Sonic is uncritically working with Gunn to take down the Black Arms. Sonic has teamed up with Eggman before if the world needed it. It's not like he's joining Eggman's team permanently. He's not enlisting in the Eggman army. He's joining them temporarily. Because of course, the terrorists are here and they want to vor everyone. Desperate times call for desperate measures. But when Sonic teams up with Eggman, he doesn't, train in expert mode to join the Eggman army full time. He doesn't beg Shadow to not take down the egg pawns. There isn't a framed photo of Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog on Ivo Robotnik's desk. He's not telling Shadow how he hates to tick off Eggman, but he needs to bounce off of those robots to get to the other side of the gap. And the games make it very clear that as soon as they're done working with Eggman, he is back to being evil. Meanwhile, when it comes to Gun, Sonic says straight up, no, Shadow, those are the good guys, they're on our side, which is wild considering what Gun has taken from Shadow. Even bolder than how they handle it with Shadow, in my opinion, is how they handle it with Tower. I mean, think about Commander Tower. We learn in his backstory that he grew up on the Ark, and after the Ark incident resulted in the death of his parents and Maria, who he considered to be a sister, he joined the group that actively killed his entire family, the organization that killed just about everyone he ever knew. And he blamed Shadow. Now, of course, there was a government cover-up. Based on the evidence we get in the game and in later installments, even Tower was not aware of the details of Project Shadow and the murder of Maria, and how could he be? He was just a child at the time. He just saw a weird alien and freaked out and made whatever the fuck this expression is. But I find it interesting the ease he had in assuming that it was Shadow's fault. After all, Shadow is an outsider. One might say, if they wanted to be heavy-handed in a leftist video essay, that in Abraham's mind, Shadow is an alien from foreign borders, and as such is a danger to society. So Abraham completely overlooks Gun's part in the assault and dedicates himself to the fight against people like Shadow, who he considers indistinguishable from the terrorist threat at hand. Let's put a pin in that. God, Commander Tower? Commander Tower is on the front lines against the terrorists? What intrigues me so much about Shadow05 is the comfort that the writing team had in telling this story. A story about an alien force invading the free world and exploding United States landmarks. A story where Gun has shifted from an enemy to the story and to the protagonist side. But it does call me to question why they made the move to have Shadow join the military in the first place. I wonder if, because of when the games came out, the storytellers considered Shadow joining the government Black Ops as part of showing his transition out of villainy. After all, when the world is celebrating the troops as the heroes, what better way to show that Shadow is a hero now, or at least no longer a villain, than by having him join the troops? Sega was not alone in making a game that was more charitable to the military. Everyone was being more charitable to the military. Everyone. This video is not an exclusive critique of Sega, or at least that's not the point of this video. I just want to talk about my boy. But to me, it is the most interesting part of this game. Sometimes people watch my videos and they're like, oh, we're not allowed to have fun and enjoy things? You gotta make everything political? This is me enjoying it. This is just what I'm like. These videos are a hobby for me. I'm not making big bank on my leftist analyses of the Sonic series and on Disney cartoons. I do it for fun. I haven't been sent by big Killjoy Media Theory in a ploy to make you buy more Killjoy Media Theory. I'm just a fan of their product. But Shadow05 is so cool. It feels like a time capsule in a way. The evolution of Gun in the Sonic games between Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow05 feels like a microcosm of the way that Americans discussed the military and the war on terror at the time. It's fascinating to me. But it does call into question what comes next for Shadow. The narrative of the Sonic games has established Shadow at this point as a grim protector of this world with unsavory, tragic, and complex beginnings. He's rejected the preordained roles that they've tried to make him fill. He's rejected being a tool, a science experiment, a weapon. So, who is he going to be now? Well, let's take a look. Let me tell you the story of Shadow the Hedgehog. After Black Doom is defeated, Shadow resolves to choose his own destiny and carve his own path. The world has hurt him irrevocably, but he isn't going to be defined by it. Of course, he aims to protect the world that Maria loved, but he isn't chained to that promise out of servitude or obligation. Maria's wish is in his heart, but his heart is his own. Shadow decides to walk away from the past. Later installments of the franchise will prove that it isn't as easy when the past is staring him in the face, but he perseveres. As mentioned earlier, he eventually works with Gun. They have the manpower to keep the world safe against whatever threatens it. Nobody ever needs to go through the tragedies that Shadow himself has gone through. It's not that Shadow has found himself, it's that he's built himself anew. And while the world will inevitably be under risk again, the ultimate life form will do what he can from the shadows to step in when he's needed the most. The only question that remains is whether or not someone with such unsavory beginnings and such power running through his veins can be trusted. At the start of Shadow's story in Sonic 06, we see him taking orders from Gun, on a mission to save one of their agents, his friend Rouge the Bat. If you don't know what happens in Sonic 06, it's a lot, but here's what you do need to know for the purpose of this video. Shadow finds himself in a ruined future with Rouge. There is nothing there except fire and ash, and in fact they have just come across the 200-year-old lifeless body of their robot friend Omega. Omega is powered off, but specifically he is in standby mode. Like, he's on a timer until a certain moment, and he's not reacting to external stimuli. There's nothing that could be done for him for now. Rouge eventually gets home in present day, but Shadow gets trapped in the future when he's drawn into a battle against Mephiles the Dark, the time-traveling embodiment of darkness who eerily wears Shadow's face. Shadow demands answers for what happened to the world that he has sworn to protect, and Mephiles reveals that it was destroyed by a being by the name of Iblis. Iblis? Which is the name of a big giant fire monster, but it's also the name of Iblis, the Islamic devil. You know, the devil from the Quran. How am I the first person I know to make this joke? The devil from Quran is here and nobody makes bits about it. What the fuck?
Shadow, أنا إبليس الشيطان من القرآن. جئت لأقنعك بفعل أشياء سيئة.
I gotta do everything myself, I guess. I don't have any larger point about it, I just think it's neat. But Mephiles also responds by showing Shadow himself, the shadow of the future, imprisoned and contained. Mephiles explains to Shadow that at the end of the world, humanity hunted Shadow down and locked him away, blaming him as the thing that caused all of this destruction and ruined the world. And Mephiles offers Shadow the chance to join him and destroy all of humanity. He tells him, "You have every right to want justice." And Shadow rejects this. Mephiles offers Shadow the vengeance that he once craved, and Shadow tells Mephiles to go fuck himself. And it's worth noting, the Shadow the Hedgehog at the beginning of Shadow 2005 would have taken Mephiles on his offer in a heartbeat. It feels like growth. It feels substantial for this character. When Mephiles asks Shadow if he forgives the humans, Shadow simply responds by saying he follows his own destiny. It's not about forgiveness. It's about his principles. It's not about what the humans do to him. It's how he will choose to respond. Omega wakes up from standby mode and he joins Shadow, and together they kick Mephiles' ass and they find their way back to the present. And later on in the game, when he meets up with Rouge and Omega, they commiserate with him about humanity turning on him. They agree, this fucking sucks. And Omega in particular notes that this is something that humans do when they're afraid of things that are different than them, things that are more powerful than them. But Rouge assures Shadow that no matter what, she will always be there for him.
Shadow? Even if you believe everyone in the world will be against you, know that I'll always remain by your side. Remember that.
At the end of Shadow's story in Sonic 06, he yet again faces Mephiles, and Mephiles once again offers him the chance to join him. But Shadow stays defiant, and in the middle of this complete mixed bag of a game is this amazing moment.
It's futile. The world will betray you. Why fight at all? Why risk your life for those who will persecute you later?
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
I love Shadow the Hedgehog so you don't understand. You'll never understand. I don't understand. I love him so much. I'm winded. I'm too old for this. I am too old to be this obsessed with Shadow the Hedgehog. If the world chooses to become his enemy, he will fight as he always has. This is the line. This is the moment in Sonic 06 for me. After a lifetime of rejection, both in the past and apparently also in a ruined future, Shadow has found his people. He has found friends who will support him no matter what. And that is part of why he finds this world worthwhile, why he finds it worth fighting for. Shadow's story is by far my favorite part of Sonic 06. I obviously have notes on the storylines for Sonic and Silver, but I will unequivocally say that Shadow's story, right next to his story in Sonic Battle, are such a magnificent turn for this character, and one that I wish Sonic Team would lean into more. God, someone should make a video on the story of Sonic 06, like a real media analysis, not just someone dunking on it or making fun of the kiss scene, okay? Like, that's been done to death. I mean a real video talking about the ins and outs of it. Guys, I know that the kiss scene takes up so much emotional real estate when it comes to talking about Sonic 06's story, but there are so many more interesting things to sink your teeth in, both very good and very bad. And I wish that the conversation would expand a bit more. Ugh. 1 second. So this is an amazing moment in the game. But I think one of the most interesting details of the I will fight as I always have scene in Sonic 06 is that Shadow doesn't really know that he will win that fight. In Sonic and Silver's story, they are able to ultimately change the future by going into the past. For example, Sonic and Silver are able to open a portal for Sonic to go back in time and save Elise from an explosion. Sonic and Elise do get to go back in time and blow out the candle and erase Solaris out of existence. They are able to make concrete and demonstrable changes that affect time and space. And that is how they interpret time travel. If you go back, you can make things different. But when Shadow encounters time travel, I suspect that he walks away with a different interpretation. Yes, he is the one who ultimately seals Mephiles in the Scepter of Darkness in the past, but he does so knowing that it will work, because he's already encountered the seal in present day. Yes, Rouge was able to tell Omega in the present to wait 200 years to help Shadow get out of the future, but Shadow doesn't need an explanation of that, because they already encountered Omega in standby mode 10 minutes before Omega woke up. And that is why when Shadow holds the Scepter of Darkness that contains Mephiles in the past, and he leaves it by a tree, when Silver questions if he's just gonna leave it there on the floor, Shadow replies that he already knows what's going to happen to it. He knows that the scepter will end up in Rouge's hand in present day, and that it will break, and that Mephiles will be a threat. But he doesn't try to stop this. He's content to just leave it by the tree. I can see Silver, if he was in Shadow's shoes here, attempting to, I don't know, bury the seal that contains Mephiles in a vault 80 feet underground. I can see Silver attempting to chuck it into the ocean, doing whatever he can to make sure that the bad future doesn't come to fruition. But Shadow does not seem to think this to be the nature of time. From where Shadow is standing, no matter what he does to the scepter, in one way or another, the scepter will end up in the exact same place. And in his story, he doesn't encounter much evidence to the contrary. While Silver and Sonic have experienced time travel as an intervention that can change things, Shadow has encountered it mostly as a self-fulfilling prophecy, as a stable time loop, where his presence has only resulted in things that he knows to be the case. For Silver and Sonic, they have the hope and tenacity to see time as fluid. For Shadow, it is set in stone, and there's little point in trying to change it. He already knows what will happen. For Shadow's arc in Sonic 06, this is what gives this moment so much oomph for me. Even as he makes his declaration that he will fight as he always has, we cannot forget that he is shown undeniable proof that fighting doesn't work, that the human race will turn on him, that they will use one of his best friends to imprison him, and before they do so, they will see the end of the world and ultimately betray him. He will be forced to fight his way out, and he very well may ultimately fail and be crucified for it. Like, literally, look at this. They crucified my boy. Mephiles is tempting Shadow, yes, but he isn't necessarily lying about what the humans will do to him. And Shadow might know this, but he still responds that he will fight as he always has. Even in the face of what he sees as a doomed outcome, possibly set in stone. Even if the whole world turns against him, he knows that he has his friends by his side, and so he will not just simply accept the rejection of the world. If he is captured by the humans, he is captured by the humans. If he fails, he fails. But it's better to fight and fail to win than to lie down like a dog and take it. Even more interesting to me is that when Mephiles tells Shadow the future, Shadow never really seems surprised by it. He seems taken aback when he first sees himself in the prison, but he isn't shocked to learn that the humans will betray him. Shadow is used to this attitude, this skepticism, this fear from the humans. In Shadow's life, rejection has been a staple ever since he lost Maria. Why should it stop now? The humans treat him like a threat by virtue of his birth, by virtue of the power that he was imbued in before he even opened his eyes, by virtue of where he came from and who he descended from. But he chooses to be stronger than their distrust and their evil. He chooses to protect something, to build something better, even in a case where it seems hopeless. He has tried vengeance, and it would have done nothing for him. It wouldn't have brought Maria back. It would have just destroyed the world that she loved. And maybe, to some extent, some of the humans of this world do not deserve this much grace from him, but at the end of the day, despite what the humans of the future think, despite what the military in Shadow05 thinks, Shadow is not a vengeful terrorist. He is assumed to be a threat because of his origins, because of his genetic makeup, but he is not a threat to this country, and he saves the world in the canon ending of Shadow05. Even though the humans were pretty shitty to him at basically every turn. There's an arc in the Sonic Archie comics that feels important to note here. And yes, I know that the Sonic Archie comics aren't canon, but this arc felt very thematically relevant, so I think it's worth mentioning. I'll try to be quick though. In Sonic Universe, we get the Shadowfall arc, in which Shadow, Rouge, Omega, and other members of Gun are called on for a mission to infiltrate a new Black Arms comet. Somehow there are more Black Arms, they have a comet, and they have come back.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Shadow is asked specifically if he has any insider information because, quote, he has spent the most time among their ranks. A statement that Shadow takes offense to. For good reason. It is markedly untrue. In any canon story, Shadow has never joined the Black Arms. He has never been officially a part of their ranks. He answers truthfully. He might be part alien, but he doesn't know shit. It isn't like he was on good terms with Black Doom. On the mission itself, he's needled by his fellow soldiers, and it's made very clear that Shadow is not completely trusted. And when Shadow needs to scout ahead on his own, the troop captain accuses him of intentionally leaving them behind to get ambushed. I won't spoil the rest of Shadowfall, which for me, by the way, is some of the most compelling Shadow the Hedgehog writing we get in the entire franchise, and introduces a character with so much raw potential that I would actually give my soul to Sega to bring him back. I think he's neat. But at one point we learned that before they set out on the mission, the gun commander actually pulls aside Rouge and Omega and orders them to kill Shadow if he goes rogue, calling Shadow a liability. Rouge and Omega push back, saying that Shadow is a hero who has saved the world multiple times. But Commander Tower has given them their orders. On one hand, the commander is likely saying this because he suspects Shadow's alien DNA might leave him susceptible to a psychic attack against the Black Arms. Something we know they could do in Shadow05. He even says he bears Shadow no ill will. But he also calls Shadow Gerald's chaos-fueled monster. And given the treatment that Shadow receives from the rest of the gun agents in this arc, it feels like Shadow's alien DNA in itself is why he's distrusted, even among members of his own team. This arc, while not canon, does not feel that out of place, especially given how Shadow is treated by humans in the actual games. Sure, he saved enough lives by the end of Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes to land on the desk of George W. Bush himself. Yeah, President Bush is very grateful for Shadow's service, and for the sacrifice that left him disabled with semi-permanent memory loss, but by the time we get to Shadow05, Shadow is still treated like public enemy number 1. When a group that Shadow is only really connected to by genetics launches an attack on the United Federation, Shadow is lumped in with them by Commander Tower. And even in the event that Shadow does the hero thing and only does heroic missions, Commander Tower still asks him to kill him on sight. I mean it. Regardless of whether or not you do the hero mission or the dark mission in Westopolis, you actually get the same cutscene. He is evil, and he is the enemy. And this energy is maintained throughout the game. Even if Shadow does every hero mission, it makes no difference. Shadow could open an orphanage, he could pay his taxes, he could get a United Federation flag tattoo on his left titty, and he could give Uncle Sam a blowjob in front of the Lincoln Memorial, but it won't make a difference. There isn't a version of this story where Commander Tower trusts him before the end of the game. The story posits that Commander Tower is this way because he endured a horrible loss, and that is part of why he is so suspicious. But that trauma isn't only tied specifically to Shadow. Commander Tower has this ancient memory of just seeing Shadow in a tube in the same room as Black Doom, and that's enough for Tower to never trust him. But I want to be clear that Shadow never actually did anything to Tower while they lived on the Ark together. Except maybe be kind of passive-aggressive to Tower when he was like 8. At least going by a deleted cutscene of Shadow Dark Beginnings.
This is impossible.
It's pathetically easy.
Shut up.
Like, this is all I could find of Shadow being a little bitch.
It breaks my heart you two don't get along.
I'm sorry if I upset you, Maria. And Abraham.
And yes, just to emphasize, this scene was deleted, so this isn't even canon. Even in the scene where Tower gives the order for Gunn to shoot Shadow on sight, the soldier is like, sir, Shadow hasn't done anything wrong, he's on our side. And Tower is like, no, we're killing him. And the soldier just has to do it. What was that thing I said about soldiers being at the whim of what the people above them think is right, regardless of whether or not it's actually right? But it doesn't matter what Shadow has actually personally done to Commander Tower, or to anyone. You're either with us, or you're with the terrorists. And Shadow, in Abe's view, could never truly be one of us. And so he must be the alternative. When trusting the enemy is made to feel like a public safety issue that could put the lives of thousands of people at risk, who you consider the enemy becomes an ever-expanding pool. Through Tower's perspective, Shadow is guilty by association with a group that he's practically never met or heard of until that day. Shadow is an alien, and as such, by the orders of the United Federation, he is sentenced to death until proven innocent. Shadow is not one of the Black Arms. He never even met his dad before this game. But Gunn does not need evidence to prove he's one of the terrorists. They already know that Shadow is an alien. So instead, Shadow needs to prove that he's one of the good ones. One of the safe ones. And if you're a Middle Eastern or Muslim person, and you lived in the United States in the aftermath of 9/11, boy, might this feel a bit familiar to you. Hell, even if you're not Arab or Muslim, people who are Iranian, South Asian, Sikh instead of Muslim, they were still subjected to Islamophobia. Because racist people don't care enough to differentiate actually Middle Eastern people from people who are just vaguely brown. How did that song go again?
I watch CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran.
Arab people, or people racialized as such, weren't treated like people after 9/11. They were treated like the enemy. A vague hive mind of inhuman aliens who all supposedly hated America. Al-Qaeda wasn't just a militant group in Afghanistan, it was part of the enemy. So an attack on Iraq might as well have been an attack on them. It's all the same anyways. Now, I believe that just about every racialized black and brown marginalized group in this country has a history of being treated as inherently more dangerous or more threatening, but we're not just talking about a misdirected fear of violence, we're talking about specifically a fear of terrorism. And Shadow's canon story reeks of that fear. Abraham has been begging for a reason to go after Shadow. He's just been waiting for him to fuck up. At one point in one of the story routes, the military commander has a gun to Shadow's head, and Shadow is the one who has to be reasonable to avoid getting shot by the head of the free world's military.
If what you say is true, then I will respectfully accept my fate.
You mean to tell me that you really don't remember a thing?
But I just need some time to uncover the real truth.
And then, of course, Shadow saves everybody. But even the ending story, a story where Shadow fights against Black Doom on the same side as Gunn, with the promise to protect the world, ends up feeling loaded to me. So, in the United States, even from people who stood against Islamophobia in the years after 9/11, they would often do so saying things like, we need to be good to Middle Eastern people so they'll help us in the fight against terrorism. And a lot of the time they would say that in the same Congress sessions where they signed bills like the Patriot Act, bills to monitor mosques and keep an eye on Muslim families, just to make sure they're one of the good ones. Just normal people going to church were being spied on by the CIA, had their phones tapped into, and were suspected of terrorism in accordance to a law signed by elected officials. They were no longer citizens who were innocent until proven guilty. In the eyes of the law, they were now a liability, a terror threat waiting to happen. But let's step back a moment. The messaging by politicians wasn't always, don't be racist because racism is wrong. Instead, it was often, we can't alienate the peace-loving moderate Muslims or they won't help us in the war on terror. Even as they legally suspected all Muslims of being dangerous, actual politicians would go on TV and say things like, guys, stop being Islamophobic, or else the good Muslims won't help us fight the bad ones.
They would demonize and discriminate against hard-working, terror-hating Muslim Americans who we need in the fight against radicalization.
Like we all know each other, as if we all know the terrorists and we have them on speed dial. Like we're all a hive mind with a single evil alien overlord. Yeah, sure, we're all in Al-Qaeda's weekly Zoom call, and if you treat us nicely enough, we'll go, no, Osama, you stop that. Joe Biden said to stop, Osama, no. My mom had 4 kids to micromanage, and all of my dad's free time went to his party poker addiction. Well, when would they have had time to track down and identify and mingle with the terrorists and stop all of their evil plans? Anyways, guys, don't suspect Shadow. He might technically be part Black Arms and have their evil blood running through his evil veins, but he's a moderate. Psst, he's not gonna help us if we're mean to him. We should still keep an eye on him, though. Does he have a mosque he goes to? A shawarma truck he frequents? I don't know, man. We gotta make sure the company he keeps is safe, you know what I'm saying? The United Federation was Patriot acting Shadow the Hedgehog, and the series isn't even self-aware about it enough for it to even be a poignant message. Yeesh! Hey Shadow, do you condemn the Black Arms? I know you single-handedly killed them all with a giant space laser, even while under threat from the military of the people you were protecting, but I'm gonna need to hear you say that you condemn them out loud just like a few more times, or else I'm personally gonna believe that you support them in everything they've ever done, and that you personally want to kiss every single Black Arms alien right on its mouth. I am not saying that Shadow the Hedgehog is Middle Eastern, but I am saying that if he and Sonic were in a TSA line, he would be the one to be randomly selected. I am not saying that Shadow the Hedgehog is Muslim, but Ammo Shadow is coming over for Eid and he is going to give me $20. I am not saying that Shadow the Hedgehog is an Arab. In fact, if I were to say that the only character in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise who wields an AK-47 and is repeatedly called a terrorist by the government is an Arab, that might constitute as a hate crime. What I am saying is that I'm offering him a pass. Look, Arab don't have a cookout per se, but, you know, Achi Shadow can come over and gossip with the Khatis and hang out in that one living room that's really fancy that we don't really use that much. You've heard him in the Twitter takeovers. Drip coffee dilutes the flavor too much, but my guy's never had Arabic coffee. That shit is strong. So yeah, he's coming over. He's invited. I'm inviting him. My boy has never had kanafa. He wouldn't be so sad and grumpy all the time if he just had some kanafa. And by the way, just because I project on Shadow the Hedgehog doesn't mean you can't. People get kind of weird about ethnicity headcanons on the internet, but I'm not the only type of person who's allowed to project on Shadow. Otherwise, who would be left for sad white boys? They'd have nobody. But what I'm getting at is this. Before all of this goes down, Shadow is feared. He is othered. Even possibly going back to the days on the Ark, and I don't just mean his beef with an 8-year-old. I know that the Shadow Jet Black Hedgehog manga isn't inherently canon, but if we treat it as indicative of how the scientists treated Shadow, the picture that it paints is interesting. The scientists don't really treat him as one of their own. Early on in the manga, he gains praise when he saves them from a threat, but when Gun shows up, they sell him out. He is not one of them. He is an animal. He is an alien. We are human. Kill him, not us. And this hurts Shadow for good reason. And after the Ark incident, he is kept in stasis. In a situation where the United Federation military invaded his home, killed his family, and destabilized where he comes from, he is the one considered a threat. His grief means that they fear his vengeance, but who is at fault for his grief? The United Federation's military decisions, even in Sonic's world, continue to create a lot of its own homeland security problems. The saddest part of Shadow's story, at least to me, is how little choice he has had in it in what we have seen so far. On the Ark, he could only ever be the ultimate life form. He was created with a purpose, with a job to do, and aside from protecting Maria and saving her life, he was being promised to 2 separate government entities. After Gun attacked the Ark, he was stuffed into stasis, and then when he wakes up 50 years later, his memories aren't even his own. Yes, it's his choice to rob the bank and to attack the military bases, but he is doing so under false pretenses that it's what Maria would have wanted. I do believe that Gerald Robotnik cared for Shadow. That's the impression that we get in Shadow05 and later on in Shadow Generations. But I do think that one of the most egregious of all of his actions in that long list of mistakes that he made was actually making it so that Shadow couldn't even trust his own mind. When Rouge asks him about it, asking him if he can even be sure that he's remembering right, Shadow says this.
Even if my memories are not real, it's still me, Shadow, and I will fulfill my promise to Maria. That's the only thing that matters to me now.
He doesn't even know who he is without this. This promise is all he has, and he's not even remembering the correct promise. And then, after Shadow has sacrificed everything at the end of Sonic Adventure 2, when he gets up, he doesn't have any memories. And yeah, there's a loss of agency that comes with that, with not knowing your own experiences and where you've come from. But at least in Sonic Heroes, his choices are completely his own. When he wakes up, all of the noise is gone. There is no mission. There aren't any false implanted memories. He is completely neutral. And what is the first choice that he makes upon waking up? He saves Rouge. He doesn't know this bitch. He just woke up from the tube, but he saw someone who needed help, and he jumped in to save her. This is who he is. And then we make our way to Shadow05, and I can't help but see something else in this story. Shadow has been living on Earth, and possibly in the United Federation, for as long as he could remember. By some contexts, you can see him as an immigrant in this country. By others, perhaps, you can see him as a refugee. But he lives on this Earth as much as the humans do when it is invaded. In the last story, he is up against Black Doom. At great risk to himself, he proved himself to be on the good side. And it's a good thing too, because he kinda had to.
Justice will finally be served.
And in the end, the president and the commander, amid all of the applause from the gun soldiers, they go, "Oh man, we might have fucked up here. Maybe we should have believed that Shadow wasn't evil. Maybe we shouldn't have shot Gerald 50 times via firing squad. Maybe we're the baddies. But they don't need to make amends. Shadow's not getting an olive branch. He's not even getting a fucking Olive Garden gift card. Instead, Shadow gets a job. He gets the opportunity to train to join Gun, so the audience can see just how much he's grown through all this. Just like Commander Tower, Shadow is now part of the same organization that took everything from him. And they don't need to do anything to fix what they did. I mean, of course, they can't do anything to fix it. Like all forms of military intervention, you can't just undo the lives that were lost when you invade somewhere. Maria is dead. Shadow is not getting those 50 years back, no matter what they do. And so, Gun just gets to be happily surprised that Shadow ended up being one of the good ones. And even then, they don't completely trust him. So in 2021, Sonic Channel had this event going on where they had this calendar, and every month they would release a short story focusing on Sonic and another character. It's like fan fiction being released monthly, only it's not fan fiction, it's just fiction being released by an official Sega resource. As far as I can tell, these stories are considered canon, unless there's something contradicting that. I don't know, let me know. But as far as I can tell, they are in fact canon. Shadow's story is the July story, though it was actually released at the end of June, so, you know, happy Pride. And I think Shadow's is one of the more interesting ones in the collection. So here's how it goes, as best as I could parse out from the rough translation. Sonic is enjoying his time on Mission Street in a big city when he comes across Shadow fighting gun beetles, specifically military reconnaissance drones. Sonic steps in and is asking what Shadow is doing, and Shadow replies saying it's not Sonic's business, to which Sonic steps in like, it absolutely is my business. I don't want to get arrested. Shadow, we know these people are hedgehog racist. I'm gonna get blamed for whatever it is you're doing. Shadow defeats the robots and teleports away, but Sonic is able to track him down with a device from Tails that can detect high chaos energy. Again, Shadow is fighting gun robots and guards, making his way to the vault of a bank in the middle of the city. When Shadow gets to the vault, Sonic is already there, waiting, holding the keycard to get in. And Sonic is yet again like, just tell me what is going on, man. I'll give you the vault key if you just tell me. So Shadow sighs, and he explains that while this place is officially a bank, that's actually a front. In reality, it is a weapons research facility, and they are doing research on a mysterious power-generating capsule that they've gotten from Dr. Eggman. And Shadow has it on good authority that at midnight tonight, that capsule will explode, destroying half the city. The energy detector that Sonic has is going off at the vault entrance, confirming Shadow's story, so Sonic helps him into the vault. The scientists inside the lab hidden behind the vault are screaming. This thing is about to explode. Shadow makes his way to the capsule, he chaos controls it into the sky where it explodes safely, and then he chaos controls back to the ground, and no one is hurt. The day is saved. And at the end of the story, Sonic approaches Shadow like, I thought you didn't care about humanity. What was all that? And Shadow essentially says, I don't, but I wish they would stop being fucking idiots. You know, on Shadow's bio on the Sonic Channel website, it does actually say that he hates humanity. Likes, none. Dislikes, all of humanity. It's giving 14-year-old who just discovered nihilism. I kind of love it. It's camp. And on one hand, that's kind of funny, but on the other hand, I kind of get it. Maria left him with this last wish to protect humanity, and when I think about it, I can imagine that Shadow's a little bit like, girl, I'm trying. But they keep doing terrorism, and then I need to fix it. They keep leaving bombs in banks in highly populated cities. They keep building weapons laboratories in the middle of highly populated cities. They keep giving the cops excessive weaponry. They keep waging wars and making nukes and killing the planet. And look, Maria, Walla, I am doing my best, but these humans are literally too stupid to live. Ugh. I would hate them too, shit! The story actually has a happy ending, with Sonic telling Shadow more or less that the humans owe him their thanks, and with the both of them looking up at the space colony arc silhouetted in the moon before Shadow rides off towards the horizon on his motorcycle. And I love this story. I think it's great. But there's something about it that I keep coming back to. You see, before the bomb explodes and before Shadow and Sonic get into the bank vault, we actually find out that before all of this happened, Shadow actually tried warning Gunn. Like, he told them, I have this intel. This is a bomb. It is going to go off at midnight. We need to stop this from happening. And Gunn didn't believe him. He told them that a major metropolitan area was going to be half wiped out, and they decided they would rather risk that than believe what he says. Even now, he isn't trusted. After everything he's done for them, even as he saves them again and again and again, in the face of being hurt by the humans again and again and again, it doesn't matter. From now until the end of time, he could fight for them. He could even die for them. But no matter what Shadow the Hedgehog does, he'll never really be considered one of them, will he? Let me tell you a story. On the day of 9/11, like most elementary school students across the country, I was sent home, and I ended up staying home for about a week. Not just because the country was shaken and grieving, but because my school, which was in a predominantly Muslim neighborhood, had received several shooting threats against the student body. A few weeks later, my grandmother, while on a walk with my little sister, has a gun drawn on her. My grandmother is one of the only women in my family who wears a hijab. About a year after that, a brick is thrown through our living room window. When the police arrived, they asked our parents if they had done anything to take off any of the neighbors, and our parents explained that no, our family kind of stick to ourselves these days. The police, frankly, do not believe them, and they continue that line of questioning until eventually they leave, saying there's nothing more they can do. About a year after that, a message is spray painted on our garage telling my family to go back to where we came from, which is particularly odd considering the country we came from, at least according to the United States, is no longer an actual nation. And in this country, my family is treated like a hostile entity, like aliens invading the neighborhood. Though, as far as I could remember, that's the only place we've ever been. So we exist in limbo, torn between worlds. One where we can't return, and one where we'll truly never belong. At the time, I'm an autistic preteen, though nobody knows it. Though, I guess an obsession with a certain blue, fast hedgehog should have been everyone's first clue, but of course, an obsession with Sonic the Hedgehog was not yet in the DSM-5's section on autism, so how could they have known? But being neurodivergent means that it's hard for me to read people, it's hard for me to find people I can trust, it's hard for me to find a place where I truly belong. And when I find out that I'm queer and get gradually more estranged from my family, it gets harder to find where that is. I don't even know who I am. I don't know who I'm supposed to be. I'm just trying to fit in with my family, and my family is just trying to fit in with a country that treats them like a threat. Eventually, I find a family to call my own. I find my people, my own merry band of misfits. And we stick together and we see one another for who we truly are, but even within this group, when I tell them I'm raised Muslim, I get wary looks in response. One of them asks, but you weren't raised by, like, the crazy ones, right? Another one says, but you're not anymore, right? Another one makes a joke about not getting on airplanes with me. I think I laughed at the time, but I don't think I really thought it was funny. I don't even think the friends in question remember making those statements, but I sure do. But I do remember being left with the very strange sense that despite thinking I'd found the people I fit in with like a puzzle piece, perhaps the catch-all community where I instantly belonged didn't really exist. Like a part alien hybrid, there wasn't really a space pre-made for me, and I would never really find that space amongst white America, or straight America, or even queer America. But of course, since then, I've learned that community is not something you find, it's something you build. You might come to the conclusion after watching this video that I hate this country, which is a painfully familiar sentiment lobbied against people like me and my family, and ultimately a very complicated one, but what I will say is that I don't hate the people in this country. On multiple fronts, the world has chosen to become my enemy again and again, and all I could do is fight as I always have, not just for my sake, but for the sake of the family that raised me, the family I found, the life that I've built myself. And of course, because the world has never gotten better without a fight, without frustration, without anger. All of this to say, directly or indirectly, a lot of my formative memories have been shaped in one way or another by 9/11. It is inescapable, and I'm fine now, but one might say I can never forget. It's been engraved in me, stamped in me like a commemorative coin. But still, in all of the ways that the ripples of 9/11 have shown up inexplicably in my life and caused me some kind of distress or anguish, I can think of one instance where it happened, and I didn't even realize it had happened until years later. Sorry if you've heard this one before. I'm 11 years old and I'm visiting my grandparents' house. I'm sitting at the table eating mahmoud, and on the kitchen table is a gaming magazine that belongs to my uncle. The same uncle who introduced me to the Sonic the Hedgehog series by buying me Sonic Advance 3 for my 10th birthday. An uncle who actually passed away last year, and who I really, really miss. So I'm flipping through this Game Informer, or maybe it was a Nintendo Power, or maybe it was a Game Pro, I don't know, but what I do see is this. Somewhere in the middle, between the ads for Call of Duty and an ad to join the Navy, is a full-page ad for Shadow the Hedgehog. He's holding a gun, standing in front of a wall of flames, and according to the tagline, he doesn't even know what he's fighting for. I look at this picture for a very long time, and I can't help but wonder why he looks so angry.